This recording. Excellent. All right. Good morning and welcome to Leadership Tomorrow Government Day mini workshop via Zoom. We're so excited that you're all here. Look at this class. You guys are amazing. I'm just so proud of you. So excited. And thank you for being flexible and fluid with us in this new version that we're doing right now for LT. It may not be new to you. We've probably all been Zooming. Tonight I have 3 Zooms that will overlap and I'm a teacher in 2 of them. So it's always interesting, isn't it? But thank you. And I want to thank our guests that are going to be with us this morning. Mayor O'Neill is on right now and Mayor Bernstein is here, and we have others that are coming and going. I mean, the slate today is absolutely amazing. So your coordinators for today are LT Chairman Scott Schultz, Fire Chief Jeff Boyles, and Vlad Anderson. These are the 3 on the committee. So I'm now going to, start monitoring chat. You guys, please feel free to use the chat. We're going to keep you all muted until you want to ask questions. At that point, please feel free to unmute yourself and give your name so that our guests will know who you are. And again, I'm just excited to have them today. Government Day is an overview of what government looks like in Orange County and specifically even the 4 cities that Leadership Tomorrow serves. So Scott, turning it over to you.
Thank you, Trudy, and thank everybody for being here today. We understand that everybody is kind of zoomed out, but we felt like it was very important just to keep some kind of continuity to the program. So we're excited that everybody's here. And since we did this last month and it went pretty well, I think we kind of have it down. Everybody's here on time, so that's always a good way to start. So that being said, I want to introduce the mayor of Newport Beach, Mr. Will O'Neill. Phenomenal mayor, and if everybody is aware or didn't catch it, he had a national spotlight on Fox News, it was last week, I believe, talking about the beach closures in Newport Beach and did a great job representing the city. So he went from Newport Beach to the world, basically, and did a great job. So that being said, let's all welcome the mayor of Newport Beach, Will O'Neill.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Sure. So, Mr. O'Neill, we're going to just do kind of we want to be as interactive as possible with this. So we're going to do some questions. We're going to let the class ask some questions and, make it as exciting of a half an hour with you as we can get. So to start, I know that the process in Newport Beach is a little different than normal when it comes to electing a mayor. So can you tell us about that process a little bit?
Sure, I can. Interestingly enough, actually, it's far more normal than to directly elect your mayor. So we have 34 cities in Orange County. And of those 34 cities, I believe only 6 actually directly elect their mayor. So the rest of us, we choose amongst ourselves on council. So our residents will elect us. In Newport Beach, we have a hybrid system. This is where we're out of the ordinary. We have districts, but we run citywide. And so we have 7 districts, but you have to live in the district to run, but then you run citywide. The thought process there, at least, and I'm gonna come back to the mayor question, I promise, but the thought process is, in Newport Beach, we're kind of a city of villages. If you can think of it, the peninsula obviously very different from Newport Coast. Corona del Mar is very different from the Back Bay. And so you have this, you want to make sure that everyone is represented by having someone living there. But at the same time, you'd only be representing 11 or 12,000 residents if you did that. And so we want everyone to represent the entire city. And so that's how we handle our elections. Once you're elected on, there's 7 of us, and we choose amongst ourselves to be mayor. I was actually mayor pro tem 2 years in a row. It worked out, at the time, it worked out pretty well. There are some days right now, I do wish I had taken the mayor position last year instead of this year. But I've heard from a number of people that they're very happy that I took the mayor position this year, and my wife's probably not one of them. But that's how we've chosen amongst ourselves is you have to get 4 votes. We've never had a non-unanimous vote for mayor, but that's how we do it, and that's how most cities do it, including, I know Tustin, you've got Dr. Bernstein. I'm really, by the way, very pleased to be the warm-up act for him. He's been in elected office for quite some time and a fantastic leader. So I'm happy to be the warm-up act.
Perfect. Thank you. With the beach closures being in the news so much lately, can you tell us how your office oversees the beaches, how that process works?
Absolutely. So every beach in Newport Beach is a city beach. That's a little different than Huntington Beach, for example, where you have Bolsa Chica, Huntington State Beach, and you also have the Huntington City Beach. Most people, I think, when they think of Huntington Beach, they just assume the city has control over all of it. They actually have a control of maybe a quarter, maybe a third of the beaches that you think of when you think of Huntington Beach. In Newport, we control all of our beaches, which is about 7 miles. A lot of it is about 400 yards deep, so it's a very large beach. And in 4th of July, for 4th of July, we'll usually see 120, 130,000 people on the beach during a day. That doesn't mean all at once. It just means from the moment the beach is open until the moment it closes, we estimate somewhere between 120, 130,000. We obviously haven't been getting anywhere near that, but we do have Memorial Day weekend coming up. We've been really fortunate over the last couple weekends. Last weekend, the state beaches opened up their parking lots up in Huntington. So did Huntington. They opened up the parking lots again down in Crystal Cove. San Diego's beaches are open. Los Angeles's beaches are open. So we've seen an easing effect, especially in our neighborhoods, because we've also opened up some of our beach parking lots as well. The one thing I'll just caution is we have in Newport Beach a ton of overlapping government entities, a ton of them. So people don't usually think about it, but we do. So when we're thinking of beaches, the two that come to mind immediately are our State Lands Commission and our California Coastal Commission. Even during the pandemic, every time we make any kind of restriction on our beaches, we need to go get a waiver from the California Coastal Commission. Early on, they were giving those waivers out pretty much like rubber stamps, not as much anymore. And that's probably appropriate, frankly. I think that we probably shouldn't have been giving out as many waivers as we were seeing because we've now seen the health effects of being outdoors is extremely good. And closing off the wide open spaces in any community was very bad. And we were seeing that anytime a community was closing off their open spaces, they were seeing higher COVID positive cases than communities that weren't. The other problem, just as a side note, is that anytime you close off a public space, you're going to have people choosing not to follow those laws. It happens in every city. It happens all over the place in every county, in every part of our state. And so at that point, you're putting your police officers in a position of trying to decide, do we really want to go enforce that? And if the answer is yes, then you're having your police officers interact with a lot more people in a time when, unfortunately, we've seen tens of thousands of people being released from prisons and jails. And the question at that point is, what's better use of your resources, having your police officers patrolling the beaches and parks, or having them go in and make sure that your 7-Elevens aren't getting robbed and people's homes aren't being burglarized? It's not an easy call. That one's an easy call, but it's not an easy call when you're trying to make the decision on what to keep legal and what not to.
Right. Yeah, that's a difficult position to be in for sure. We had Chief Boyles with us last week, and he's here with us again. And we had Chief Lewis with us also last month. Sorry, not last week. Can you talk about how your office works with those two departments in an emergency situation, similar to what we're dealing with right now?
Yeah. So, how many of you got to watch the Michael Jordan documentary? Okay, so it was fantastic. There's this great scene in the most recent episode where they were talking about Game 6, the Bulls versus the Jazz, and Michael Jordan is taking the last shot. Everyone knows he's taking the last shot. And there's a question that the cinematographer asked, okay, so what were you thinking in that moment? And you had Scottie Pippen just look up and say, I just got out of the way. When it comes to law enforcement matters, there are, what you need to do is, before an emergency happens, you need to develop a relationship and you need to develop the trust. And in large part, that responsibility goes to our police department and our fire department. They need to develop that trust with us as the policymakers, because when an emergency happens, we need to know that they are going to be not only competent, but they have the skill set to take care of the emergency itself. And the truth is they're in a position because they have risen up through ranks. And we're really fortunate in Newport Beach to have two people at the top of the public safety departments. First off, who are fantastic, and I put them up against anyone in any city in our entire state, frankly. And I'm not just saying that because Jeff's on the Zoom call. I really do believe that. But we're also really fortunate to have two individuals who came up through the ranks inside our department. And so you have the history of understanding what the community is and what it needs. Every community is unique. Every community has its own unique needs, its own unique personality. And in Newport, like I said at the beginning, it's a city of villages. And so you really need to have that feel for it. And so I kind of joke that I get out of the way. The truth is, we do when it comes to the when it comes to the hands-on policies. I'm sorry, the application, the hands-on application. But we do set the policy, right? And that's our job at the city council level. We need to be in line. We need to be in tune with what's going on the ground, so that when we make the decisions, we're understanding them, and we need to take into consultation and advice from the people who really understand it. And that is our police chief, and that's our fire chief. Every city right now is going through a lot of budget discussions, and some of them are going to be a lot harder than others. And that's going to be true for years to come, because you're seeing the pension issues flaring up. So you can't be planning right now for just 1 year of trying to get through it. You've got to be planning for at least 3 years from now, because CalPERS does not send a pension, it doesn't send you your bill until 2 years after the fiscal year ends. And this fiscal year is going to be a train wreck at the end of June 30. So every city's got to be planning for this. And so the question is, where do you find the cuts? I know that Costa Mesa yesterday 2 days ago had their meeting. They're looking at a $30 million cut next year out of a $150 million budget. Put that in context, because Newport Beach is looking around the same. We're looking around 31 million, but our budget's $230 million. So when you have a cut like that, you better have some strong reserves. Newport has them. And so when we are cutting back on our tiers, we've created a tier system. And what that means for us is our public safety and our services that people come to expect, that will be cut last. I don't anticipate actually having to do service cuts inside those departments. So when I work with them in an emergency situation, I'm always thinking of not only the short term, but we got to be thinking about long term, because this is going to be a long-term issue.
Nice. Since we do have Chief Boyles on here as well, I know that Memorial Day is coming up, and I would assume that there's going to be a lot of people flocking to the beach. You guys, are you anticipating heavy volume? Are you ready for that? And Jeff, maybe you want to chime in on this a little bit as well.
I mean, I'm happy to defer to Jeff on the response to that. I can tell you that, yeah, we anticipate having more people than maybe we normally would in the last few weekends, but we're kind of fortunate. I think Saturday and Sunday are going to be on the low end on the weather. I think we're going to be low 70s, which is not ideal beach weather. It's fine, but it's not ideal. And so we've been seeing anywhere between 30 and 40,000 people. I mentioned at the beginning that it's 120, 130 on 4th of July weekends. So the one thing I'll say that we are finding, and it's one of those things you just kind of learn as you go forward. All the restaurants have been closed, but they're open for takeout, which is great. We need those restaurants to survive. The problem is that when they're closed and people are doing takeout, there's a lot more trash. And so we've been having to increase our trash pickup. So I guarantee you, we're going to do a lot more of that this weekend. But in terms of the volume, I'll let Jeff speak to that, but I would tell you that we can handle a lot more than we're already seeing. Although I would hope that, I can tell you, I think most people, they really do understand the seriousness of the situation we're in. I think before the pandemic happened, it was still weird to go and spend time next to someone within 6 feet at the beach. I don't do that. I don't think most people did that anyway, and now no one's doing it. So we're still seeing a lot of people distanced out. I expect to see the same thing. I would like to see a lot fewer pop-ups. It would be nice. The pictures, just the visuals are terrible. It'd be really nice to have people paying attention to that. I'd like to see fewer umbrellas. The problem on the umbrella side, and I'll just point this out real quick, active recreation, and I know Jeff, I know I'm speaking on Jeff's behalf right now, but I'll just say active recreation is a nightmare for enforcement reasons. Are we really, like I said at the beginning, are we really going to devote police resources to, paying attention to moms on blankets and seniors under umbrellas? I don't think so. I mean, really, the quantity of criminal that's back on the streets because of the jails, reducing population because of COVID, and prisons also reducing population. We're seeing it already. We're seeing it, and so are other cities around us. So we've really got to be, education oriented when it comes to the beaches. But I think people are still pretty wary of other people, strangers especially. So we're seeing a lot of social distancing on that. But I'd love to hear from Jeff because I would have to anyway.
Okay, I'll hop in. I'll just give you one quick example, Scott, with Memorial Day coming up. We have information that there's some type of almost, if you want to call it a protest boat parade out in the harbor. So it's not permitted. We expect the harbor to be busy anyway because it's Memorial Day weekend. So the department directors meet every day on a conference call, and we discuss things that are coming up, what we can plan for, what we need to adjust to, things like that. So for example, the one in the harbor, we'll have the sheriffs out there, we'll have our harbor department out there, but I'm going to put a couple lifeguard boats as well. And like Mayor O'Neill was saying, it is difficult to enforce. So we're really relying on personal responsibility for people when they go to the beach or when they go and recreate in the harbor, because telling people or trying to give somebody a citation for sitting under an umbrella really is just really threading a needle with personal rights and constitutional rights. And we're balancing a pandemic and potential community outbreak as well. So that's really difficult for our lifeguards to enforce and for our police officers to enforce. So I just want people to wrap their heads around what we deal with on a hourly basis out there on the beaches when Will was talking about the umbrellas. So we focus on the water first and people's safety and what the lifeguards do. Then we focus on obvious illegal activity, drinking on the beach, fire rings, smoking dogs, things that we really actually do enforce. We give citations for. And then from there, we start fanning them out into our social distancing. And it's really an educational piece. And it's kind of a do your part to help us help you, if you will. So that's kind of been our approach right now. We haven't issued any citations, but when people do bring an easy up in coolers and they congregate, we will actually ask them to move. So when a mom is sitting under an umbrella while her kids are playing, that's one of those judgment calls. Like when an officer pulls you over, they can make the judgment. Did they think you were being unsafe, or did they think you were just making a mistake? So we have to give grace to our lifeguards and our officers that have to balance that. And I had one other point, Scott, that I wanted right when I saw Will log on here. If you just indulge me for 30 seconds. Obviously, this Zoom is a modification to the robust program that we had planned, and I offered to take this one over in September. It seemed like a great idea last year. But just so the whole class knows, we had a mayor's panel, we had a city manager's panel, we had a tour of City Hall, we had the luncheon, but we also had Will O'Neill's dad scheduled as the leadership guest speaker, because I reached out to Will and I said, hey, you know a lot of people. I need a good leadership guest speaker this year. He said, well, his dad's just retired federal judge, former police officer. He's doing some teaching now at UCI Law School. Does that sound right, Will? So if you guys saw Will on Fox News, he threw a shout out to his father. So I'm really bummed we missed out on that. Hopefully next year's class could get it, but I just wanted you to know that he talked about getting out of our way, my way and John Lewis's way. Will is very involved. He's at everything. He's involved with everything. He is not afraid to step up and make a decision, but he's also brave enough to get out of the way and let people do their jobs too. It's really we're fortunate right now. We have good leadership around the city.
Oh, thanks, Jeff. And my dad's amazing. I'm really lucky. I actually come from a long line of public servants. My dad is actually he was third generation lawyer. I'm fourth generation lawyer. And the reason we actually were able to sustain that tier is because of my dad's mom. My dad's mom was actually, she went to Bolt Law School in 1940. She was one of only 3 women in her class. She was actually told by one of her professors in her first year that she shouldn't be there because she was taking the spot of a man who'd be supporting his family. I'm really glad she was there. She met my grandfather there. She ended up not graduating on time right away because when World War II broke out, or was about to break out, she gave up her spots to men who were going to be called up into the service. And then by the time her third year rolled around, they weren't offering enough classes anymore because professors were gone. So after my grandfather had passed, when my dad was 17, she went back, got her degree, and helped write portions of the family law code. So my daughter's middle name is actually named after hers because I would very much like her to understand, my daughter that is, to understand the people that paved the way for her to have the choices that she'll have. So I'm really lucky. I'm really fortunate. My dad is a pretty amazing person. And so he had written the speech. So I'm sure he'd be more than happy to deliver it at some point down the road.
Awesome. Well, hopefully next year we can make that happen. And of course, this is really kind of an open forum when we have it in person, because we are inviting potential class members to come and see how Leadership Tomorrow works. So you all will be welcome back, of course, next year for Government Day for that portion of it. So we will try and make this right and make the best of the situation. But that being said, let's go ahead and open up questions to the class for the mayor, and we will take it from there. Not everybody at once.
Hey, this is Roxanne. I have a quick question. I'm sorry I'm staying video mute. My dog is actually chasing after a squirrel right now, so my apologies. But I just wanted to know, with everything that's going on between, COVID happening, just general running around, how are you staying mentally sane through all of this? Because I feel like most people who don't have the level of pressure that you're under are already losing it. So I just wanted to know how you're keeping it together.
Yeah, no, that's it's a fair question. I think most people in my position probably wouldn't even want to answer the question or talk to it. So I'll just say I've probably experienced 2 or 3 of the worst weeks that I've probably ever experienced during this time. When we had the pretty intense national scrutiny that was going on, I was losing sleep a lot. I was just having a really hard time wrapping my head around how to respond to something that the city really just has never gone through. And you're going through that at the same time. You're getting emails daily of real tragedies going on in people's lives, not just concerns about the fear of the pandemic, which is its own issue, but it's also economic realities of people who are losing their jobs, losing their businesses that they built for decades. And you're very rarely receiving any kind of positive messages in your inbox. Most of the time, actually, they're fairly critical and pretty mean. And I can understand that, because what happens is when you have a lot of fear in your life, it becomes myopic, and so you can only have that tunnel vision of what you're seeing and what you're afraid of. And unfortunately, what that turns into is frustration, and then frustration turns into anger, and you start seeing these stages of building up in your city. And when you're the mayor or you're on the city council, you absorb too much of it if you're not careful. And so I'm really fortunate to have a lot of support system in my life. I had a lot of people reaching out to me just asking how I'm doing, which is not normal. This isn't exactly normal times, but I've had a lot of people asking, and I've got some really close people in my life who made sure that they were checking in on me. And so and I also just say I absorb stress differently, I think, than most other people, in the sense that my personality tends to be pretty even. And I think Jeff would probably be able to tell you that. I become more calm when we have storms around us. That may be the lawyer in me, but I'm not sure. That's always been the case. So, but I lose my appetite. Like most people stress eat, I do the opposite. And then interestingly enough, because I've gone through the process of being home a lot more, I'm eating a lot better because my wife forces me to. She loves kale. I don't like kale, but I'm eating a lot better. And so on top of that, we bought a Peloton a year ago. Now I wish I bought stock in Peloton too. But anyway, so I've increased exercise. I've eaten better. I've lost my appetite, but I'm getting it back. But I kind of lost it for a little while. I'm down 20 pounds during quarantine, which is kind of like the opposite of the freshman 15. So so one of the ways that I've been doing it is because I talk to people who, I have friends who are police officers, and they spend a lot of time obviously thinking about grief counseling when people are going through traumatic events. And so early on during this, when I was realizing that I was absorbing the fear and anger and a little bit more than I should be. I reached out to some friends of mine who understood what grief counseling looked like. It's not called grief counseling. It's more traumatic event counseling. It wasn't the same thing, obviously, as going through the heightened, but I was at least trying to understand, like, what are the steps that people need to take to make sure that they're mentally and physically healthy. And I started doing a lot of those. And so that's how I've been able to move through this. And it's a real problem, not just amongst elected leaders. I mean, early on when I was doing the interviews with Hogue to find out what's going on at the hospital, I'd asked them what they were seeing in terms of COVID patients and what they were seeing in terms of hospital capacity, because keep in mind, for about 6 weeks, they couldn't do elective surgeries. And they told me, well, we've only had anywhere between 7 and 12. At the highest they'd ever treated was 25 patients who were positive for COVID. But most of the time they were 7 to 12. So their hospital was basically empty, except for 2 areas: addiction specialties and mental specialties. And those programs had wait lists, and they were seeing spikes in the calls that they were coming in. They're still seeing that. We're still seeing a lot of suicide hotline spikes. We're still seeing a lot of domestic, fortunately in Newport, we haven't really seen the spike in domestic violence calls that you're seeing in other counties. And in fact, actually, our sheriff would tell you is happening in Orange County as well. But the mental issues and making sure that your community is moving through this in a stable environment is really important. And then maintaining that leadership at a time when a lot of people are afraid. You can't feed that fear. You just can't. Some people do it unwittingly. Some people do it maliciously because it increases their power over their communities. But the responsibility is on the leaders themselves to make sure that they are doing everything they can, not to spread fear, but to spread education and allow people to make the right decisions for themselves.
Hey, Scott, and if I can, I just hop in because this is kind of my wheelhouse as well. What Will was referring to there is, without a doubt, these elected officials, what I'm seeing right now, are going to experience some PTSD, the post-traumatic stress disorder or injury, if you will, they're calling it now, because they're having to shoulder communities really beating them up. I'm losing my business. My son or child is depressed and suicidal, and you should see some of the things that they're dealing with. I'm just a fire chief and I get probably 1/10 of it. So having to shoulder that from somebody that was probably a community activist and an organizer and just wanted to be part of Will's 2020 campaign was Year of the Volunteer, and he was going to bring the community together. It was going to be positive, feel good, and we entered into this disaster. So I think you'll see something in overall leadership. You'll see with Dr. Bernstein here in a few minutes too, that leadership requires calm and it requires level-headedness. So when the leaders are feeling that urge, and we all get it, when you know the wheels are wobbling, it's time to reset and find some sort of healthy outlet. Sure. I think we talked about that last month as well, didn't we?
We did. Okay, we have about 3 minutes. We have time for one quick question. Can we get one more from the class?
I have a question, if that's all right. First of all, I would like to thank you for sharing some of your time this morning. And then also, so this year, obviously, everyone had to pivot, understandably, with the resources financially and just your energy because of COVID. But what had you hoped? Like, what was your top goal? And maybe it was volunteerism, but what had you hoped to accomplish this year with this time if this pandemic had not come along?
Yeah, so the major things that we were going to be focused in on is making sure that we had our core services right, we had our core infrastructure right. We were heading in a really great direction. We still are, frankly. We'll be okay in Newport on both of those fronts. It just is it looks different, but we've been able to accomplish both of those. We also had a pretty substantial issue coming our way with the regional housing needs assessment. So basically, the city or the state had told us we needed to put in thousands and thousands of housing units into our city, or at least plan for them. And that was going to be incredibly difficult. In theory, we still are supposed to do that. And the only reason I say in theory is because the regional body, it's called SCAG, Southern California Association of Governments, they still haven't actually certified the number on the housing needs. And so one of the most contentious issues inside our city and just about every other city is housing development. And so having the state tell us we needed to put in almost 5,000 units into our city was contentious, and it was going to be contentious, and we needed to bring the community together. And then the third issue was going to be volunteerism. We needed to celebrate a lot of the things that make our state great. And people oftentimes, especially in other cities, will they get to know a lot of our residents in Newport, realize a lot of them were C-suite executives or still are. And so there's a high expectation of quality, and they also have a high expectation that you're going to respond to their emails very quickly. And so they oftentimes will ask us, like, how do you deal with that? And first off, I think that all you have to do is look at the balance. On balance, we have a lot of residents who are very driven, and what they do with that driven personality is they give back, especially when they're retired. I mean, you should see what our Friends of Oasis are doing right now. Oasis is our senior center. The Friends of Oasis is a 501c3 that, they are always doing great things, but now with all of our seniors missing out on their senior center, and then also having, socially isolated, the way that group has stepped up is fantastic. So we were going to celebrate the volunteerism. So yeah, it looks very different, certainly, than what I had anticipated at the beginning of this year, but we're still seeing a lot of people stepping up, and we're still seeing that year of the volunteer play out. We just can't celebrate them quite as much, but I know they're there. And I'm asking staff and I'm asking residents to keep track of all of the great things that people are doing, because at the end of this, we need to celebrate something. And I guarantee it's going to be volunteerism.
Awesome. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Mayor O'Neill. Before I turn this over to Chief Boyles for Dr. Bernstein, we want to take a group picture, which is the new thing to do on Zoom. So we want to make sure and capture that. And Josh, you're going to do that for us, correct?
I'm on it. Everyone's just got to look at their actual camera and smile. Don't look at yourself. Look at the camera. And 3, 2, and there's a photo. We'll do this for each speaker, by the way, so we'll have a bunch.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you very much. And Doc, I'm telling you, I'm glad he was on here to listen to this, because really this is a warm-up for someone who's awesome, doing some great things in Tustin. So good luck, Doc. Doc.
Before you go, I just want to say,
Thank you, Mayor O'Neill.
also very, very proud of the job that you're doing in Newport Beach. Well, you're a tremendous leader and a great colleague, and you're always recommending things for thought and for implementation that help our constituencies. And I just want to say, we'll get through this together. We know that we will. And that celebration is going to be unbelievable, and I'm looking forward to it for sure.
Absolutely. All right. Have a great day, everyone. Be well.
Take care. Okay, I'm going to turn this over to Chief Boyles. And lucky for you guys, you don't have to listen to me talk for a while. Jeff, take it over.
Okay, thanks. Thanks, Dr. Bernstein, for joining us. He joined us last year at the City of Newport Beach when we had our mayor's panel, right? You were there. I remember you being...
I think it was 2 years ago, no?
Was it 2 years ago? Okay, it might have been 2 years ago.
Time is flying. And just
yes.
Despite all of this, it seems like the time is just going.
Right as I said that, I thought it might not have been last year. But okay, so Dr. Mayor Alan Bernstein was elected to the City Council in 2012, re-elected in 2016, was Mayor Pro Tem in 2015, and Mayor in 2016. So maybe that's when you were out. And again, Mayor Pro Tem in 2018. He has a long list of committees that he's served on, including the Orange County Sanitation, Water Advisory, LAFCO, Orange County LAFCO. And I'm looking through all the things you do here, Dr. Bernstein. And if I did that, it would take us till 10 o'clock.
Don't worry about it, Jeff. It's
long story short, I would just like to say that he was magna cum laude graduate in New York College of Podiatric Medicine. Did I say that correctly?
close.
Bachelor's degree from Boston. So he's a New Yorker, Boston guy. Does that mean you're a Red Sox or Yankees fan? That's interesting. And then I think it's important to know that when we say Dr. Bernstein, that's not like a doctor of philosophy. He's actually a respected reconstructive foot and ankle surgeon in private practice in Tustin for the last 23 years or so. He resides in Tustin with his wife, Randy, and son, Adam. And with that, being as though you are actually a medical doctor, I'm going to lob you up a softball question here, Dr. Bernstein, since we've already talked about it a little bit with Will O'Neill. But with your medical background with the COVID pandemic, what issues as a mayor have you been dealing with or helping your city navigate through?
Well, thank you very much for that introduction, and thank you for the opportunity to join this robust group of people interested in leadership, as we always are interested in leadership. It's been a very interesting time for me being the mayor and being a physician at the same time, because now every mayor in Orange County is a physician. And so it's been interesting to try to deal with the medical issues and see it through a prism. It's sort of blending the two prisms that I've assumed the responsibility of here in Tustin. So one is a public policy perspective and a prism. The other obviously is a medical perspective. And so for me, looking at the particular metrics that we've come to hear about and learn about as to what type of how many new cases we're seeing per day, how many people are being tested per day, what are the positives out of those people being tested, how many people are being admitted to the hospital, and how many people are being admitted to the ICU. Those metrics then give us an idea of where we're going with regards to flattening the curve and how we're doing with the social distancing and the stay-at-home order. There's an argumentation on every side, just as in every profession. Take hydroxychloroquine, don't take hydroxychloroquine, wear a mask, don't wear a mask. So trying to go through those different parameters as a physician and make those decisions, in my mind, whatever layer of protection you can add to yourself cannot hurt. I love to see when people are wearing their masks down below their nose, and I try to inform them that now you're wearing your mask as a fashion accessory, because it's certainly not protecting you from either transmitting or receiving any viral particles. So it's been a challenge. The other thing that's really been interesting is, you have a certain amount of authority as the mayor in your city, of course, but the people who work in your city, our staffs, they're the professionals. I'm a transient. I'm here for 8 years. I try to do some things. I have some cool ideas. I'm reasonably good in front of a camera. And so I come to bring certain experiences to the table. But in the same token, and by and large, I will talk to my staff, given that they've devoted their entire life to the endeavor of running a municipality in an efficient manner. And so then you add on top of that being a physician. And so I'm coming with that eye as to how many infections are there in the city? What does the county look like? What are the metrics that the state is looking from the county so that we can move forward together as a city? Because as everyone knows, there's a lot of tension in the cities to move forward at a pace that is not coincident with one another, which in my mind would be a catastrophe. We got to try to move forward in some fashion as close to being coordinated as possible. Now, there's little differences. Obviously, Orange County, we've been blessed so far with regards to COVID. And we can move quicker than many other counties in the state. It's just a matter of having everything in place so that if, God forbid, we do have a surge, that we have capacity in the hospitals, that we are testing with appropriate testing, which has been a bugaboo really as it has evolved, because a lot of things came out in an emergency situation very quickly. And what we're coming to find is a serology test, which now everybody knows tests for antibodies, meaning that you've been exposed to the virus already, which from a public policy perspective gives you more information as to going forward and opening up your city, as opposed to testing specifically for the presence of the infection, which is the antigen test, which is the swabbing tests that are so popular. The swab test gives you information with regards to who you need to identify and isolate and prevent further spread of the infection. The other test gives you more information with regards to how much does our community, how much in our community is there actually some level of immunity, which is also argumentative, and I won't get into that, but let's just say that you do get some level of immunity from having the infection. and then you can make some determinations or where do we lie as a county going forward. Those things are being done now at the county level in a partnership that's been undertaken with UCI to get about 5,000 random tests performed in Orange County to give some idea, a statistically relevant number that we can then start to go forward and have a better idea of what percentage of the community has had exposure, does have some level of immunity, and how much actually doesn't. Because in relaxing the restrictions and going deeper into these stages, what we're going to be doing is you're going to be seeing the numbers increase. We are, in fact, going to be spreading the infection, but we're hoping to do it in a judicious and deliberate fashion so that we don't overwhelm the healthcare system. That is basically what that's about. And so with that kind of eye, as you spoke about before, I have emails and phone calls from friends and constituents that own businesses that are on the brink. And it does bring tremendous amount of responsibility and pressure for those of us that are making those decisions. So for me, I want to open up as expeditiously as possible, but at the same time doing it judiciously so that we don't impart a catastrophe. The last thing we want to do is go forward and then start to go backward and start to have to take these add more restrictions.
So you started to lead into a quick question I had, and we won't belabor COVID forever, but in the spirit of Government Day, Will mentioned there's 34 cities in Orange County, and the fire chiefs meet twice a week. We're meeting at 1:30 today, but all of us come from the same profession, same walk of life. Those 34 mayors are a conglomerate of society that you guys do for everything. Will's an attorney. How many of them pick up the phone and call you, since you're a doctor, and say, hey, what are you thinking? What do you do with your city? Or what should we do? Does that go on?
It does. A handful will give you a call. We also have at least 2, if not 3 teleconferences a week with the mayors. And once we get past the B&M session and start to get down to the nitty gritty, that's when the questions start to arise for me. Now, some people listen, and some people obviously think that they know better for their constituents. And so I do it with a bit of a smile and a grain of salt. I'm there to give that medical information, given that I'm the closest thing to a public health official, in our city, aside from obviously the county public health official. But it's been very interesting. So you try not to lean in and you try not to get frustrated, but you listen, you instruct, you base your information obviously on the evidence-based literature and what's happening. That's part of my life. That's who I am. And it seems that most people are listening to what I'm saying so far.
Okay, so obviously as the mayor, that's your opportunity, that's your year to really communicate your message with the community. And you've done, personally, you're doing YouTube videos, right? You've done about 7 YouTube mayors updates?
I am.
What do those look like, and what messages have you been sending to your community this year, both before COVID and now?
Well, I recommend, of course, each and every one of you to go to YouTube and look up those videos. Those are done in conjunction, of course, with City Hall. We sit down and do the script and what the topics, try to be up to date on what's happening with regards to the governor's orders and sort of give a more understandable perspective of what is actually being said, because each and every one of us that are sitting here have looked at these things, have been confused about what's going on and how the state is trying to coordinate with the county and the county with the cities and what exactly is supposed to be done. And so what we decided to do was, I thought it was really important to be available and show that the city's got it under control as best as possible. We're taking all things into consideration. The best interests of our constituents are at our heart. And this is the way to help navigate through these uncharted waters. I hate to use that phrase. I'm sure it's been used a million times, but that's exactly what we're all doing. There's not too many of us can raise our hands and say we've been part of a pandemic. So now that everybody who's a mayor or been in a position of authority in Orange County during this time will be an answer to a trivia question 10 years from now and say, who was the mayor of Newport Beach during the pandemic of 2020? Or who was the city manager, or who was the chief of police or the fire department? And so what we're trying to do is simply understand that these decisions are weighty. We're talking about people's lives and livelihoods and mental health, of course. And how do we proceed accordingly to avoid a minefield which is out there? This disease is virulent. It's easily spreadable. We're learning more and more about it every day. It is voracious. And again, I keep saying we have been blessed, and perhaps and hopefully in the future we'll be able to say that the precautions that we've taken here in Orange County have helped us stay at a reasonably wonderful level compared. Now, God forbid anybody should get sick, and God forbid anybody should go without saying. But by and large, we've been very lucky here in Orange County, and we want to continue to do so as we begin to roll back the restrictions and increase congregation of people. Because remember, about 20% of the population, conservatively estimated, has the infection and doesn't even know it. And so that is why wearing a mask, remaining socially distant, doing all the hygienic practices, all those things are even more important now as we start to congregate more in public.
Right. Okay, good information. The reason I've always really enjoyed Government Day, being a student of local government, is like Will was saying, in Newport Beach, they run in districts, and some cities elect their mayor, some appoint their mayor, general law cities, charter law cities. So in Tustin, you guys have a biannual budget. You guys do your budget every 2 years, correct?
Correct.
And are you in the middle of it right now, or are you coming up on the new one?
We are coming up on the new one with a major curveball.
Right. So which obviously leads right into how do you see the adjustment? How do you project 2 years out with this curveball?
Yeah, this is a weighty question. So let me just, from my perspective, it's this. Our finance department is sharp as a tack. Our economic development team, they're sharp as a tack. And so what we're doing is sitting down and projecting with the loss in sales tax revenue, what's happening with our property tax, how that's going to go forward, and trying to sit down and formulate a budget, knowing that what we're trying to do and everybody's trying to balance is we don't want to reduce services. That's the last option on the table. So fundamentally, what capital improvement projects are going to be put on hold for a bit? How are we going to rob Peter to pay Paul, if you will, which is always the decision in going forward when you're looking at things, at these numbers and how to deal with your budget. Tustin is very blessed. We've managed our funds tremendously, and we have a tremendous reserve. We've typically ran about 30% reserve in the city of Tustin. So we have a standing marker of 20%. And so we've got some latitude to deal with that. We'll see how that all gets poured into the pot and stirred around and see exactly how that all comes out. But we do know that we're going to, just like every other city, we're going to take a major hit here, and we are game planning of how to go about making up for that and seeing what we do going forward.
Right, and you mentioned when you were talking about COVID a couple of minutes ago, I hadn't heard it presented in that fashion, and I think I'll put that in my vernacular. You talked about we're dealing with lives and livelihoods. So that's our balance right now. That's the needle we're trying to thread of people's livelihoods versus the lives at stake, and how do you do that? Okay. You guys also, Will O'Neill talked about the RENA numbers, and you guys were looking at some building projects, the Tustin Legacy Master Plan, and some residential community on the former El Toro Marine Base. Is that something that you guys are still working towards?
Of course. Again, another blessing to be turned over 1,600 acres in the middle of Orange County is a pretty incredible thing to deal with. And I think that from my perspective, we've done really beautifully with it. it's been a asset, obviously, to the city to be able to utilize the previous Marine Corps Air Station. Yes, right now what we're doing is talking to people that, we were in process for several larger developments that were, moving forward. Everyone has sort of hit a pause button right now. And so we're dealing with that and how to go about that appropriately and maintain people's interest and be positive about it. So we're efforting through all those issues right now, have been, and trying to keep those deals from, falling completely apart and going forward. But, the tenor right now obviously is one of hopefully cautious optimism, but definitely one of anxiety. So right now we're just sort of sitting down and brainstorming about, what ifs and trying to be as prepared as possible given the challenges before us.
Okay, so we're in the 10-minute window now. What I'd like to do, Dr. Bernstein, is give you an opportunity to give us a little bit on what's in your head, your messaging, your thoughts. I think I went there earlier, but what did you run on? What are some cool ideas, your words, that you had for Tustin? Once COVID's a small snapshot and we'll get through it. What do you see for Tustin?
Well, again, I see nothing but good things for the city of Tustin. One of the things that I ran on was, despite the good economic times that the city has experienced, and we've all have experienced up until a couple of months ago, I basically describe it as we put the economy into an induced coma. That's fundamentally what we did. And now we're trying to wake up a patient that's been in an induced coma that also happens to have an infectious disease. So it's step lightly and trust your instincts going forward. But for me, one of the things I wanted to do was, I felt that there were a lot of vacancies in certain key strategic places in the city. And so for me, what I wanted to do was to see if I could sit down with property owners and renters and see if there was a way to come up with some creative relationship between a person, a property owner or a landlord, and those that are renting, to come into some kind of partnership together where you reduce the rent initially in some particular metric fashion and enter into fundamentally a partnership with those people. So as the better as their business does, giving them an opportunity to ramp their business up, the better that they do in business, the better the landlord does. And so we were starting to have some of those discussions, and then this whole thing hit and put that whole idea sort of in the back burner. And now we're probably going to be missing a few more teeth than I even when I came into office. So again, creativity and cooperation is going to be the key going forward. Another thing that's been very interesting is the balance, and we read about it and see about it every day. There's an attempted balance between civil liberty and public health. And what we're all trying to do is thread that needle together, understanding that there are times, obviously, the restrictions that have been put upon us. Again, hopefully in retrospect, we'll see that those were in fact prudent and help bend the curve and reduce the spread of the infection. And at the same token, making sure that we're not oppressive in utilizing those restrictions and not inhibiting civil liberty. So I think we've done, by and large, I think in Orange County, we've done a really good job of that. But you're always going to get people that are not particularly happy with that. And, we see them on TV every day at these rallies, and they're all standing on top of one another, and none of them are wearing a mask, and they're all for, liberty and freedom. And I understand where they're coming from. I understand their frustration, but sometimes I scratch my head about how they go about it. I mean, many of us have seen that picture of the guy walking into some fast food restaurant with a rocket launcher on his back. I wasn't quite sure if that was probably proper messaging, and I'm not sure if that was the optics that they wanted to get, but that's really been an interesting balance. More interesting than not. I'm sure there'll be plenty of papers and plenty of people running around writing books and lecturing about the balance of civil liberty and public health. But so far, I'm very proud actually of the job that the public health officer has done in Orange County. What we wanted to do as mayors was increase the communication from her office, and we've done that to really get a better understanding of how they're thinking about going and how we can coordinate to be a part of that in setting up the COVID-19 testing network and whatnot, and being as on the same page as much as possible going forward as a county. So we don't have one city doing these 3 things and my city not doing that, but we're doing 2 other things. That is just a recipe for chaos.
Right. Hey, Scott, do you have any questions, or anybody from the class have any questions for Dr. Bernstein?
I think we should open it up to the class so that way we stay on time, because we have about 6 minutes.
Okay.
So if I can jump in, first of all, hi, Dr. Allen.
Hi, Josh.
Good to see you. I have a business in Tustin. We've met a few times through Tustin Chamber. Yesterday was a big day for our city. There was a meeting about what's going to be happening with the schools. And I know your wife has, a little bit of involvement with our education here in Tustin. I have a 5-year-old who's really excited to go to kindergarten in the fall. And frankly, we are considering just keeping him home for a semester and homeschooling, because we're not even sure what that's going to look like. I got the Cliff Notes from somebody, which basically said they're doing whatever the CDC says, but I have a feeling there's more than that. Can you possibly share a little more about what took place in yesterday's meeting about kids going back to school?
Well, Josh, they're keeping that. I don't have the Cliff Notes yet. As a matter of fact, I've got to look for myself to see exactly how that all transpired. I'll be honest with you. It's talk about dealing with that. That has been really interesting. And again, seeing it through the eyes of my wife, who has an after-school homework club, of how to actually come into compliance and what are the guidelines with regards to bringing people in a section of our home to conduct her business. I don't know much more about that. I'm going to be honest with you. I have not had a chance to see and really kind of get the inside scoop on what's going on with that. Josh, I'm sorry, I don't know yet, but I guess at this point, following whatever CDC guidelines, it makes sense. But I don't know all the practical aspects of that. I'm sure today I'll be updated on that. It just hasn't had time to kind of filter to the mayor. As you well know, the school district and the city kind of hopefully work in parallel, but sometimes the communication takes a little bit longer to go from one side of the street to the other.
Thank you. And your videos are helping, by the way. It's good to see your face out there and in the public. Not all the mayors are doing it, and I'm glad that you are. So appreciate that.
That's very nice to say. Yeah, we're averaging, about 1,500 to 2,500 views. So thank God it's getting out there. The information is key. It gives people an idea of how to stay connected and understand what the city's doing. So I appreciate that. I appreciate those comments. I'm having a lot of fun doing it. I mean, I wish it was a little bit lighter topic, but I'm enjoying doing it and being there for the city. And again, Will was talking about emails. I mean, I get a ton of emails. Some of them actually are very positive and very encouraging, but some of them are incredibly mean. And it's interesting once you're in the public arena how you have to juggle these things. Anybody else? I know somebody else has another question.
I have a quick question, Kim Sharp. Just with your videos and what you're putting out, that obviously is a huge communication point and advantage that you have within your city or even shared outside of your city. Do you have a communication plan outside of that you guys typically stick to in the city of Tustin? And I just want to say personally, I think the more communication, the more you can put your face out there, the better. I don't live in Tustin, I live in Costa Mesa, but I do follow the cities surrounding because I think it's important to see that. I'm just curious as to what your strategy is with that and any feedback that you're getting about it.
The feedback, thank God, by and large has been really positive. I mean, you're always going to get some bizarre responses, but that's human nature. We do have a communications plan. We have a public information officer, someone who's responsible for communicating with the public. But we're also one of my goals. Speaking of goals, was to make that much more robust. I know in the old days, 7 years ago, when I first came on the city council, there was an attitude by and large that was, be quiet, don't ruffle too many feathers, people will find out what's happening eventually, that kind of thing. And now, as we all know, in the digital age, with a touch of a button, 10,000 people know exactly what you're doing or you're not doing. And so it was my intention as a goal, as the mayor, is to make it a much more robust endeavor in the city. And we have done that, and we've started to contract with outside public relations and communications entities to have a much more robust presence in the social media world and improve our standard and legendary old school communications to be in front of people. And I think now it's more of controlling the narrative is what it's all about, rather than response. That may have been the way it was always, but it seemed that people were more reluctant to get out in front of things. Now it's like, we got to get out in front of it because everybody's going to know about it tomorrow. And so that's really been my opinion and my perspective. And I've tried to imbue that within the, within the city hall, and it seems to be working. And so far, so good. I'm excited about going forward with that. As you well know, a lot of stuff has sort of been put on a burner, but we're still taking elements of a communications plan that we put together and utilizing those to our advantage.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Hey,
Todd.
Scott, my screen is showing Todd with a hand up. Is that correct?
Yes.
I think that's
Yeah,
probably
Todd,
all we have time for.
Doctor, thank you for coming by. You guys can hear me, right?
Yes.
Really, I mean, truly, I apologize for not knowing your background. It's Tustin's got a great resource in you. I think that it's fascinating. I have not heard, in this polarized atmosphere, I have not heard something that is so brutally accurate as we're going to spread the disease in a judicial manner as to not overwhelm the emergency services. That is so brutally accurate and a great comment, and it's just and so constructive. So my question's a little more, and let's see if be diplomatic with this, but how are you coming from the background you're coming from? And we all know we've got this upheaval right now, but you've got other things. How are you dealing with, let's see, how can I put this gently? How are you suffering the political, not just this political atmosphere, but politics in general, when you have such a unique and educated background, and when you just encounter certainly the polar atmosphere that we have now, polarized atmosphere? How are you handling that personally? Because I get all the things that you have to contend with, but when you're turning to politicians who are very, very, well, I'll leave it at that. I hopefully you get the question out of that, and good luck.
Well, I see that our time's up, so I just want to say thank you. No. Todd, it's such an interesting question because from my, naive perspective, politics is all about human nature. That fundamentally, that's what we're driven by. And there's good human nature and there's not good human nature. And so what you have to do is fundamentally, you look at whatever problem that you're trying to solve or trying to address. You do your due diligence, you do your homework, you ask the opinions of experts, and physicians are used to asking other experts to render a particular treatment protocol and therapeutic for patients. So I have no problem doing that. When I ran for office, I made an appointment with every department head in the city. And I walked in and said, I want you to know, I don't know anything about this. The joke about Bernstein was the only thing Bernstein does in the city of Tustin is his laundry. That's basically what my colleague, but what the people who actually prompted me to run for office, which was true. The only thing I was really involved with was when my son was involved in volleyball, in sports. That's the only thing I was really involved in the city was sports. And so I'm used to problem solving. That's part of what my, the nature of what I do is. And so I felt that if you follow that particular decision tree appropriately, you can circumvent the politics to a point. But understand that politics rules the roost, more so today. Well, probably at all times, but today it's been a lot more obviously adversarial. There's a lot more friction in politics. And so you just have to put that on the burner and be able to look in the mirror or look in Zoom and see your face reflecting back and say, you know what? I'm doing the best job that I can. I've tried to solve this problem as best as I can. You articulate that as best as you can, and you let the cards fall where they may. And what I've come to say in an easy formula is typically probably 30 to 40% of the people, we'll just use this as a generality, of course. 30 to 40% of the people don't have any idea who you are or what you're doing in the city. They just care that the streets are clean, that it's safe, and the schools are good. So the other 60% is split into 30-30. 30% think you're a genius for what you're doing, and 30% think you're an idiot for what you're doing. And so the bottom line is you just have to simply deal with that and be able to look yourself in the mirror and, of course, get the opinion of people that you respect to say, you know what, Doc, you're doing a hell of a job. We appreciate you, and keep up the good work. That's happened more often than not recently. Typically, as you well know, most people who are happy with what you're doing don't tell you so much. It's only the people that are really unhappy with what you're doing, and you hear from them. And sitting in public, comment and public input during those meetings and have people tear you to shreds and say the worst things about you, and you basically go, thank you very much, next speaker. It has been a challenge because most people forget that I'm from Philly. So if you want to throw down, that's in the old days, that was no problem. Now I'm an old man, I'm all gray, so now I have to be more diplomatic about it all. But I'm just saying, watch out for the last few months of my mayorship as they term out, because I'm going to probably I should write a book, things you'd like to say during public input. And you might tune into our meetings because I'm going to be saying them then. So it should be a lot of fun going forward. But thanks for that question, Ted. It's probably a wordy answer, but thank you for asking it.
Thank you, Dr. Bernstein. We really appreciate it. That was a great way to end. And hang in there. And I look forward to hearing what you really think at those meetings as well. I think Trudy wants to take a class picture.
Josh is going to take it for us.
All right. Anybody? Oh, there's Roxanne. Hi, Roxanne. Okay, everybody. Anybody else want to jump in? All right, here we go. Ready? Everyone look at the screen. Or I'm sorry, at the camera. 3, 2, 1. Got it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Josh. Thank you, Mayor Bernstein.
Thanks, everybody. I just want to say good luck in your endeavors, and every one of you that are already in the fight here. I'm really proud of each and every one of you. This is just an unprecedented time. And when it is all over, we're going to have one party like it's 1999. That's all I'm saying. And good luck to each and every one of you, and stay healthy and stay well. Thanks for the opportunity. I greatly appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you, Jeff. Okay, so we are running right on time pretty much. Mike Carroll is on the line. He is the Vice Mayor for the City of Irvine. And Mike and I were Community Services Commissioners at the same time a couple years ago, so we got to know each other pretty well. And his wife is on the Irvine Unified School District School Board as well. So they're very, very active in the community, and they do a great job representing Irvine. And we're excited to have you today, Mike.
Great, thanks, Scott. I don't know if this is a good thing here, everyone, because we're following Dr. Bernstein, who just admitted he's from Philly, with a goon Long Island New Yorker, which will be myself. So get ready.
Well, he said throwdown, so I guess that's what we'll be doing the rest of the day.
Yeah, and now I've said goon, so.
There we go. There we go. So, Mike, I wanted to just ask you a couple questions here, and then we'll open it up for the class. Your appointment to City Council was a very unique process this year. Can you tell us a little bit about that election process?
Sure, absolutely. So first of all, thank you, Scott, and thank you, really everybody in leadership tomorrow for having me on. This is really an honor. About a year, maybe about a year ago, if you asked me if I'd be doing something like this or helping, comfort and get information out to people in the city of Irvine as a member of the city council, I would have said that, how would that possibly be? But yeah, we had a amazing turn of events in our city that resulted in me getting appointed. Basically, we had the domino effect of Supervisor Todd Spitzer becoming our district attorney. And then that created a vacancy in his supervisor seat on the Orange County Board of Supes. Our then mayor, Don Wagner, my friend Don, was able to run for that supervisor seat in a special election and then win. And then that created another domino which fell, which was the then vice mayor became the mayor, our current mayor, Christina Shea, and that left open the remainder of then previously council member Shea's seat. And now I forgot the number, but I think 34 or so people applied for the appointment for that process. And after Scott and I served on the Parks and Rec Commission, the city of Irvine, a few years later, I joined the Planning Commission. And then during that time as a planning commissioner, I applied for the seat. And I don't really think anybody thought that we would have an appointment. Really, again, to the, some of Dr. Bernstein's comments about, getting along and partisanship and being on a city council, the most local form of government, touching the people. Again, the pundits didn't think it would be a reality, right? Because we had then, with Mayor Wagner becoming Supervisor Wagner, we had a council of 2 Democrats, 2 Republicans. So what happened was I was actually appointed in a bipartisan vote of 2 Republicans and 1 Democrat. And with that, I was able to get a chance to get on the city council, and it's been a pretty wild ride, as you might imagine.
For sure. I remember when that happened. And the way that played out was very beneficial to the city because it saved millions of dollars of a special election. So it was done very nicely. The Safety Community Task Force, that was actually created before any of the COVID outbreak happened. Are you guys dealing with what's going on in the city through that task force? Is that involved at all?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the mayor and I formed this Safe Communities Task Force. It was actually a reboot of an earlier task force that the city of Irvine had, and it was fantastic. We got under the way. I think we had 3 meetings, maybe 2 or 3 meetings, and we were going to take these different topics like we were dealing with issues around family composition and child abuse. We were dealing with interfaith issues, and we had the local imam from the Irvine Islamic Center. We have a rabbi, a prominent congregation, Jewish congregation, temple in our city, and we had a Christian pastor, and we had someone from the Sikh community. I think that was our last one, and it was really getting underway. The idea was to kind of bring together all the aspects and with the members of the task force, which I think Vivian Scott on the chamber board, who was part of the task force with me, to get into all these issues and then come up with a report on the types of things that we can do to become a more safe community. One of the examples from the last time they did this in the 90s, when our city was far smaller, maybe around 90,000 people, and today we're 280,000 residents. But back then, one of the interesting outputs of the Safe Communities Task Force was that there was a need that there was really no public safety, no police presence at our school sites. So that prompted, one of the things out of that task force prompted having more police presence at our school sites and more DARE officers. And that's really been a big help. And other things involve getting teenagers and youth involved. And we formed this thing called the Youth Action Team that we do through the schools, which is a city program to get teens involved. But since the crisis, we haven't had a chance to meet as a task force. I think the council has sort of taken the position that everything really needs to be focused again on kind of the 2 things that I said quickly earlier, provide information. And it was great to hear Dr. Bernstein talk about that. Provide information, and we could talk a little more about that if you like, and how I think personally and philosophically information is a calming aspect to people. And if we keep people fully informed with as much information as we possibly can as we have it, and so long as it's accurate, we'll keep people calm. If people are calm, they won't get too excited, and we certainly don't want people to panic. And if we get panic will quickly infect and almost more infectious than the virus into widespread panic. So very on at the beginning, we said, let's pause a bunch of things. We're back to having some of our commissions meet, like Parks and Rec and Planning. The task force will probably come back up, I'm hoping in the next maybe month or so.
Perfect. So I know Irvine is kind of infamous for one of the best animal shelters in the county and probably the state. So I know things have been kind of on hold with that. Can you talk about how the adoption process has changed since the outbreak?
Sure. Yeah. And thanks for bringing that up. The more information we can get out with the Irvine Animal Care Center, the better. And, as you know, we work pretty intimately with that when we were on the Community Services Commission, which is, AKA the Parks and Rec Commission that takes care of the Animal Care Center. We had some real issues and some real bumps in the road during that time that you and I served back then a couple of years ago. That's all been smoothed out, and we have an incredible animal care center. And that was, this has a nice ending, by the way. At the beginning, it was sad to be able to have to kind of like go, essentially close it, keep everybody, all the animals that are there, obviously, there and healthy as best we could. But there was really no public interaction. And as you might imagine, right, a big part of our animal care center is finding homes for, and adoptions for essentially, neglected animals that we have there. And what we did was we came up with the idea with our staff team, and I think it's about 2 or 3 weeks now that we have a socially distanced pet adoption process. So what happens is you can call or you can make an appointment online. If you call, you'll get an appointment. And we're doing animal adoptions, but they're by appointment only. And it's going relatively well. And we're having sort of a system and a process by which we're bringing people in on an appointment basis. I think probably many of you, I know I went to a bike shop. I had to fix my daughter's front tire. And, where you're lining up outside a shop and they're letting essentially one shopper or maybe 2 shoppers in at a time to the bike shop. And in this case, we're doing very much similarly where you line up for appointments and you go into the, the animal care center.
Nice. Yeah, I went onto the website and it looks like the amount of animals is getting smaller. So it seems to be working.
Yeah, it is. We've gotten some good early feedback on that.
Perfect. I know a lot of people have been fostering just because they have a lot of time on their hands. So I think it's kind of a win-win for the city. So speaking of the city, Mayor O'Neill and Mayor Bernstein were talking about the budgets a little bit and what they're dealing with. So I know Irvine's in a bit of a unique position as far as that goes. I know there's going to be losses from sales tax revenue and so forth. Can you speak about that a little bit?
I can, yeah. So yeah, basically, as vice mayor, we look pretty closely at this stuff from a financial perspective. And right now, our city's budget is on track for, they're projecting, I think it's 22 million deficit through the end of next month, through June 30. And that's going to be, a real challenge with regard to the reserves that we have. I'll talk about that in a second. And then our next year's budget, 2021, that runs until June of 2021, is our financial people. I'm not sure why it's so close, but that's tracked to be 21 or 20 million deficit currently. And you hit the nail on the head, Scott. I mean, it's a function of what you might think. And it was something that I didn't really think too much about before I became a member of the city council and just, working on planning issues and parks and rec and doing school board stuff with my wife, Betty, who was president of the school board. And our kids, I have a 10 and 13-year-old daughters in schools. We weren't really thinking about this, but a big portion of I got a helicopter flying overhead. A big portion of our revenue comes from sales tax. And we have these 2 massive sales tax feeders in the city of Irvine. Again, things I personally never thought about. We have the Irvine Auto Center. And, when people buy and lease vehicles, it's a huge amount of tax revenue for the municipality where the auto center is. So for those of you that live in cities that have auto centers, and please patronize them. And if you don't, come to Irvine. And then the Irvine Spectrum Center Mall, which is a massive revenue generator for the city of Irvine in property tax. And then third would be our hotels. And as I'm sure many of you know, our hotels, not only where people have been furloughed, but now sadly people have actually been laid off and these hotels are closed. So we're in a pretty bad spot. What have we done? We've quickly jumped on it and at least said we wanted to communicate out to our city staff as far as our staff team is concerned, and we have, organization agreements, organized labor, and we have certain unions, we've communicated out to everybody on the city staff that we're in a hiring freeze, except for a couple of essential positions in public safety at our police department that we're going to keep filling. We have a few positions there we'll fill throughout the year. But we're in a freeze, but we're also not going to be furloughing anybody. We're going to keep the same levels of service to the city residents that kind of demand that. And at the same time, we're just going to undergo, as much as we can as far as cost-cutting measures and seek to get relief. Like, for example, the CARES Act money that's sitting with the county right now, that I think some of our cities are trying to obtain some of, and federal help as well.
Nice. So that being said, I want to go ahead and open up questions of the class because we do want this to be as interactive as possible before actually Supervisor Wagner comes on right after you, Mike. So
yeah, great.
Yeah, let's go ahead and open up questions to the class.
I have a question. Thank you for all of that. And something I had written down even with the mayor before was, I know that we were talking about like retail becoming potentially vacancy with those types of things closes, but as a corporate, which we used to be in Irvine, we're in Lake Forest now where our corporate headquarters are. I don't know if I'm coming back eventually, and I am a business owner. If my lease was up, I 100% would not renew it. And I think it's just going to be really interesting to think about how much commercial space might be available or just an influx there as businesses are not looking to bring their staff back. And I just didn't know how the city's, looking to address some of that.
Yeah, that's a great question, Katie. I mean, yeah, I'm looking at it pretty closely too. The City Council of Irvine is a part-time job. I think it's $1,200 a month. My day job, I'm a corporate transactional lawyer, and I have clients in the city of Irvine and outside of the city of Irvine. And probably like many of you, I've spent a lot of time trying to get paycheck protection loans and emergency, whatever they're called, EDIL loans, and now the Main Street program to get clients information. And of course, we had some situations where we're trying to convince clients not to give the money back. They're now concerned because of the fraud that's gone on with places like Shake Shack and Ruth's Chris. I mean, the information is that it's an amazing, my goal has been to provide it when I can, make sure it's accurate before it goes out. But boy, there's so much of it, and some of it changes so fast. So onto commercial. Yeah, our largest commercial and retail, essentially landlord, of course, is the Irvine Company. And I know that, we're in constant contact with the representatives of the Irvine Company, and they're looking at it pretty seriously. And of course, they've undergone some programs with respect to rent deferral for their commercial tenants. And, you're absolutely right. I think a lot of people, and I've been talking to some tenant side broker friends at certain firms, and they've been pretty clear that, things are going to change, and not necessarily for the better. We have a real estate sector and a master plan community that's been laid down since 1971. And we like to think, in Irvine, we got it right, the way things are laid out, or at least as best as we could. And sort of my job, I'm one of 5 people, if you will, caretakers or fiduciaries of the city, board members that have to kind of guide that plan. So, I mean, I'll be honest with you, I'm scared to death with regard to our city, the amazing community we've created here, the master plan that we laid out with the forefathers of, I guess, the Irvine Company and, the famed architect William Pereira, who put UCI down and built, Fashion Island and laid out much of what is now Irvine, California. What do we do now? We have these big spaces or these big planning areas, the Spectrum Center area, the IBC or the Irvine Business Complex. This is all commercial.
Yeah.
What about we have plenty of stuff along Bake Parkway and the Lake Forest border. That was all, I know you're nodding, right? All that low tilt up stuff that was the flight path to the El Toro airport.
That's where I live, right there.
Yeah, that's right.
I live right at that intersection.
And what do? I mean, we don't want to be a bedroom community. We want to be a combination of things. We want to be a community in which you can live, work, and play. We want to be that same community that welcomes people to come work. Our city, I think we're pretty unique in Orange County. Our city doubles in population during the day. That's something I have to grapple with in a regular day because in regular times, pre-pandemic, because of traffic and issues about moving people and getting people, like the people that work behind the counter at Corner Bakery that we go and buy our lunch from, to be able to afford to live in Irvine and Orange County and kind of ease the traffic burden, all kinds of planning questions. So it's a long answer. So I guess the quick answer is I don't know, and I'm scared. I think I think you need that from your public officials. I mean, I look forward to jumping in on it and helping out in any way we can. I mean, we can't just turn all that stuff into res either. If we turn all that into residential, we're going to have all kinds of density and issues that weren't quite figured out. Like, for example, when we laid out the arterial roads that bring people in and out and our sub-arterials that bring people across the community. I'm not just trying to say, NIMBY or YIMBY or whatever. It's just that the commercial is there for a reason, and the commercial design from a planning to bring people into the commercial parking lots and spend the workday and then leave. So we can't just turn that into another product too. So it's a fascinating question. We should probably do a Zoom just on that.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it.
Well, let me add this though, Katie. This is a good thing. And if you're from Irvine, we also have the richest real estate magnate in the world who owns these places. His name is Donald Brand, as you know. And if there's one company and there's one, and this is not their advertisement. I mean, I'm not necessarily on their side all the time. If there's one company that can take the wherewithal and do the absorption, it's probably the company that acquired this land in the 1970s for $1 per acre, and that's the Irvine company. So I'm no one has endless pockets, but I'm part of my concern is balanced a little bit by this. We probably have the smartest men and women at 500 Newport Center Drive that are going to help figure this out. And one of the things I know we're doing, at least on retail, you've probably seen this, and we're going through approvals right now, is we're going to try to bring dining into the parking lots with like distance tables and stuff. I know some of you are nodding your heads. I don't know too much about it. I'm excited as heck to get into it and get involved and obviously work on whatever we can to approve it, make sure it's done safely. It sounds weird, right? But so did Uber. Uber sounded weird to me a couple of years ago.
I agree. And so did Zoom. Whoever thought?
Yeah.
Okay.
Wait, can I take a poll, Scott?
Sure.
Okay, can you raise your hand if you used Zoom before the pandemic? Okay, we have some Zoomers. Yeah.
You're funny. We have about 4 minutes, so we have time for one more question. Kathy, I see you raising your hand.
Yeah, so I have a question. Thanks again. Very helpful information. I live in Irvine as well. And one of the questions about getting confidence back that I have, and I'm interested in your thoughts for helping developers who are understandably spooked about their investment and what the value of real estate is and what the return might be. Is Irvine considering being more flexible in terms of what some of the fees they might ask for from developers, shortening timelines, shortening, review, doing whatever they can to really work with them to try and get that aspect going? And it could be commercial, it could be helping with, I think it was mentioned earlier, affordable housing, all these different issues. Is there some thoughts to help with that?
Yeah, thanks, Kathy. Let me tell you what I know, and then I will. Let me begin by ending and saying that's a lot of stuff there, and I'm gonna,
maybe not for me.
Take that back, and start thinking about that with our city team and our city manager and council. I think there's some great stuff there. I know I don't want this to be like, oh, here's what we've done, because I don't think we've done much. One of the ground level things I know we have done is we did lower fees on permitting fees, and we did, I think, defer out some other fees. We provided some fee relief. A big part of our city, another thing you wouldn't know unless, you're on a planning commission, and Kathy, you obviously know it. There's one of probably the biggest influx of people in and out of City Hall when there's no council meeting, when people want to get on the line, and, some of them are very nice and some of them are, like Dr. Bernstein said, and it's very interesting. But other than those council days, the biggest stream of people in and out of our City Hall are our builders. They're the general neighborhood contractor that's working on 4 houses down here in Turtle Rock where I live. or up in Woodbridge doing a renovation on a second floor. And it's other people doing some infill projects as well. And then we have, of course, 2 master developers that have, are subject to, a whole slew of development agreements. So, yeah, I mean, we have provided relief, I know, on the front lines for the community, smaller community builders and people, and like homeowners actually seeking permits and things like that. But that's great stuff we have to take back.
Thank you.
Nice. Perfect. Okay, so we are right on time. Mike, I appreciate your time today. I know you're a very, very busy man. And before we go, I know we want to take a group picture.
And Scott, we do want to take the picture, but Supervisor Wagner is about 5 minutes behind. So is there one more question?
Oh yeah.
Burning?
In fact, can I give you a question to give, because I'd like you to give a question to I spoke to him this morning. So who's interviewing Wagner? Schultz?
No, it's Al Murray, actually.
Al Murray is going to be moderating for Supervisor Wagner in a few moments. You have a question?
Okay, I see Al right now. Okay, Al, here's Vice Mayor Carroll's question is, where's my CARES money? Okay, so make sure to ask him on that line there.
Al, are you?
Al is like, how do I turn this mic on and shut Carroll off?
Did you really go there like this? There it is. You're muted. I have all power.
But no, I'd love to take another question. Al, good to see you. And then, it's Supervisor Wagner. That's going to be, obviously, he's been going nonstop, and I know he was actually the leader of the fight to try to get the CARES money down to the cities. So that was sort of tongue in cheek. But no, I'd love to take any more questions you guys have. And I'd like to advertise the City of Irvine COVID-19 testing program, if I could, especially for Irvine residents. The registration will go up in the next few days. We'll be announcing that. And we're really excited. It's the first citywide testing program in the county. And of course, it's testing people for antibody and antigen. And it's for people that do not have symptoms. If you have symptoms, you can come. I probably recommend you call your doctor or go to urgent care, but it's, directed at people without symptoms. And we're hoping to scale up to about 760 tests per day at our great park in a drive-through process.
Perfect. Yeah, Mike has done a really good job about getting this out through social media. The city does the same thing. So if you are an Irvine resident, you should be on their Facebook page and Instagram page. Follow Mike as well. It's been really helpful for those of us that actually live in Irvine. Doing a great job. So very impressed with everything, of course. And since we are still a few minutes out, we can take one more question.
Can I just ask one follow-up regarding that? Because that is great. I think there's been a lot of confusion about what the cost is. Can you clarify that?
Oh, for the testing?
For the testing.
Oh, sure. And then, we can get to Josh too. I'd like to hear. So very quickly, the antigen test, Do I Have It Now test is free. It is no cost to residents. And the way it works during the registration process with the medical clinic is that they ask you for health insurance information, and they're going to go ahead and get reimbursement on the health insurance side. There's no copay. There's no out of pocket. So we're kind of calling it, there's a big debate. Do we call it free? Do we call it no cost? I mean, there's some indirect cost. You're paying a health insurance premium or our employers are. And then I would just say too, if you have no health insurance, or if it's a Medicare situation, the box and I've gone through the registration with the clinic in great detail over hours. The box says, if you don't have health insurance or Medicare, type none. We're not turning anybody away. The cost to the antibody test, which is an add-on, will be $10 per test. That's just a pass-through of part of the cost. And the city is, at least initially, it probably will be up to double this to kind of get the scale. But initially, the donation is the contribution, if you will, to the nonprofit is approximately $100,000. I think it's $96,000 of taxpayer money that's going forward on this.
Perfect. Okay, so Josh, you have a question?
Quick question, then we'll do the photo after, if that's all right. Same question I asked Mayor Bernstein is, and your wife may be more equipped than you to answer this, but any idea about the fall for a school for kids?
Oh, what the future looks like for the schools?
Are they going back? Do we know if they're going back? Might it be modified day, things like that for Irvine?
Yeah. I can shed a little bit on that. Yeah, because, you know, there's marital privilege here, but I know that there's constant, it's a great question too, Josh. I mean, there's constant calls, at least I could speak for Irvine Unified. And I know Tustin, I mean, it's the amount of time and hours that have gone into these volunteer part-time positions is quite frankly staggering. And I could say that with personal experience. But part of what's being discussed with these experts is, okay, what's the governor said? What's the governor going to permit us to do? And if you think about it, Josh and everybody, it's down to the point, and as somebody that has 2 kids, I know that school-age kid, young 4th grader and 7th grader, how are they going to sit this fall? Are we going to have them socially distanced? Because if we have them desks 6 feet apart, we don't have the physical plant capability in all of our schools, as many as we may have, certainly in our community, to be able to accomplish that. So we're moving into a weird time. It's not a great answer, but it's the information answer, which is they're looking through all that stuff to kind of navigate through and figure it out. Is it partially distance and partially people, you know, kids that are going to be kind of distanced and using masks? You know, we sort of really don't know, but it's a great question, and they're going through it, and you know, it's a tough one.
Thank you.
That is a tough one. I'm sure that Betty is working overtime just as you are on the school board to try and figure out what's going on.
Yeah. The big one that really everybody was very upset about, and I'm sure many of you, I just participated in my nephew's in the Inland Empire and his virtual graduation. It was so, I don't know, it was so moving and cool, but it was different. And that was a really sad part about, at least for IUSD, to be able to do this virtual graduation. She's actually right now taping part of that at Portola High School, I think for the uni grads. It's a very, very different time and very strange time. I will say though, for those of you that haven't heard these yet, the speakers up there at Ontario High School, like the valedictorian and the ASB president, you know what, it was really cool. And I guess it reminded me that young people can kind of maybe take this stuff in stride better than their parents can. Or at least I hope so. And I would just say that that's very easy for me to say because my kids are in 4th and 7th. I don't have an 8th grade graduating in middle, and I don't have a 12th grader graduating. So I just want to be sensitive to that. But it was really cool to hear these 18-year-old kids speak. And if you haven't had a chance to watch one of these graduations, and you will soon, I think you'll find that too. It was pretty cool to listen to their resiliency.
Nice. Yeah, I think they're a little more savvy with the technology than we are. So it's kind of par for the course for these folks.
I know.
Yeah, for sure. Okay.
Josh, got a picture for us?
Oh, yeah, let's do that.
All right, same routine, everyone. Look at the camera, smile. It's almost like I'm doing my real job. Okay, here we go. 3, 2, 1.
Hello?
There we go.
Yeah, Wagner?
Hello.
Yeah, it is, finally.
The soup!
Let me just apologize. It's my phone, not Zoom. My phone screen cracked because I'm taking after my daughter, who's now gone through 3 insurance claims, meaning I don't have one. And so, anyway, long story short, I couldn't forward what I needed. Anyway, you don't care. Never mind. Hello, everybody.
Hello.
Good morning. I'm going to take my leave, guys. So.
Oh,
Mike, thank you so much.
Thank you, Mike. We really appreciate it.
Thanks for vamping, Mike.
Oh, my pleasure. I warmed him up for you, Don. Go for it.
Awesome. And as we get started, I want to tell you, I'm so excited for all the segments we've had today. This has been awesome. I'm just over here beaming. I'm so proud of this team today and the individuals that are participating. And I'm excited about this segment. And we've asked Al Murray to moderate for us. Al is a Leadership Tomorrow graduate. Woohoo, woohoo. Al is also the recipient of Excellence in Leadership Award and many other things. And it would probably be 30 more minutes that I could share about Al. But I'm going to now turn it over to Mr. Murray and ask him to moderate the segment with Supervisor Wagner. And Supervisor Wagner, thank you so much for being here today. Al, take it away.
Pleasure's mine.
All right. Thank you, Trudy, for very nice comments. Let me just tell you a little bit about the supervisor. And I know we're running short in time, so I'll keep it short. Supervisor Wagner represents nearly 600,000 residents in the thriving communities in the 3rd District, which include Anaheim Hills, Irvine, Orange, Tustin, North Tustin, Villa Park, Yorba Linda, and the unincorporated areas in the canyons. As a practicing attorney, community college district trustee, state legislator, and past mayor of the city of Irvine from 2016 through 2019, he's had over 20 years in public service. So with that, I will turn it over to Mr. Wagner. And if you could maybe start off, Supervisor Wagner, by telling us a little bit about your role as a supervisor and the board of directors.
Sure. First of all, thank you, Al, for that. And one of the things that goes on Al's bio that was omitted is that he's been on my staff almost since I joined the Board of Supervisors, providing the absolutely wonderful service and knows the community like no one else. So, Al, you are a credit to the Leadership Tomorrow program and, of course, to much else. So thank you for your help to me and your service to our shared colleagues, constituents. So real quick, Board of Supervisors, as you heard from my background, I've kind of had the opportunity to serve in government at a bunch of different levels, the local in education, the municipal, the state level, and now the County Board of Supervisors. And maybe the easiest way to look at it, and I'm sure a lot of you know this already, and I don't want to bore you, but just to kind of put it in context, I kind of see the Board of Supervisors in 2 ways. Number one, if any of you have served in local office, say on a city council, you know, a lot of what we do is glorified city council instead of, for, in my case, Irvine and roughly 280,000 people, we're overseeing a community of roughly 3.2 million people, and of course, all the richness and diversity that entails. So but still some of the local government stuff. You've got to make sure, to be prosaic, the potholes get filled. More importantly, that the public safety functions are done well and done at a reasonable budget. You've got to make sure, at least in the county, that you are helping those that are in need of the social safety net in ways that fall on the county much more so than it does any of the individual cities. So we pretty much do some of the stuff Mike would have outlined to you as a city council, but writ a little bit large. Then there's the unique status we have as being technically a state agent, or state, an arm of the state government. We are the state of California. We are the smallest subdivision, the counties are. The cities are not actually state agents. We are as a county, and so we are under the ultimate rubric of the state. That particularly has come into play in the last couple of months as we've dealt with the COVID issue, and folks will say to us, literally at every board meeting, words to the effect of, well, you need to sue the governor. You need to get the restrictions lightened up. Why aren't you challenging the governor in court, like some of the cities are doing, like some individuals are doing? And the short answer to that question is, we are the state. We don't have standing to sue the state because that would be suing ourselves. So we've kind of got this twilight world of between the state and between the municipal governments, servicing our own constituents. And there are some unique constituents of ours, and there are some overlaps. By and large, most constituents of the board, most people living in Orange County are living in a city. There are, of course, as you know, 34 of them. And both the cities and the county have jurisdiction over those folks. There are some folks, though, that are living in the unincorporated areas of Orange County. most obviously in my district, the canyons, Silverado and Majestic Canyon. In addition, the North Tustin area. And so we've got some unincorporated areas that have no cities to represent them. We are, in that case, actually exactly like the city council. And so we've kind of got this hybrid role. One of the other ways that hybrid role plays itself out is simply in the issue of municipal funding or government funding. Specifically, the budget of the Board of Supervisors of the County of Orange is approximately this year, it's going to be dreadful next year, but this year about $6.5 billion. But less than $1 billion of that, it was $908 million, is actually discretionary, meaning we can decide how it gets spent, where it gets spent, etc. And the rest of it is, by virtue of our intermediary role, pass-through. We are administering grants from the federal government, from the state government. You'll see there are a lot of programs that are funded outside of the general fund, and that money is tied up by contract, tied up by grants, tied up by state requirements or federal requirements. The amount of that $6.5 billion that we can actually direct, as I said, last cycle, the one we're in currently, was $908 million. So in a nutshell, that's sort of the unique role the county has, both in terms of jurisdiction and in terms of our financing. And Al, happy to take any questions you or others may have.
All right. That's a good segue into my next question, Supervisor Wagner. And could you kind of articulate the distinction between the governor and what he's doing and his role versus the county role? Lots of people are questioning as to why the county can't do A, B, and C. And maybe if you can clarify that, it might be helpful.
Sure. The short answer gets back to that we are an arm of the state. The larger answer is that state law trumps any local law that is inconsistent with it throughout the state, just like federal law and the Supremacy Clause of the Constitution controls any underlying law throughout the United States if it's in conflict. And so the state just is the legal entity that is supreme in the areas in which it is allowed to operate, which are not principally, but in this case, health and safety certainly. And so when the state imposes health and safety restrictions, shutting down businesses, requiring physical distancing, all the rest, that state law can in fact be enforced by law enforcement over and in complete contradiction to what the locals say. So I'll give you a quick example of how that's played out recently. The county of Riverside had a stay-in-place order, a shelter-in-home order, and recently lifted it. We've had a lot of people come to our board meetings and say, well, why won't Orange County do the same thing? The reason is because Orange County never put a stay-in-place order on the books. So Riverside, by getting rid of its order, was only catching up to Orange County. Both of us, Orange County, Riverside, and all 58 counties in the state, remain under the state's supreme law and its own shelter-in-place orders. What that means and has meant here in Orange County is that we've lightened up. We've passed our own guidelines as to what we'll allow or not allow in our businesses, and we've instructed the sheriff to not take enforcement action if you violate the state orders but are compliant with the county's ordinance. That doesn't stop the governor from being able to send in the CHP, or heck, he could do the National Guard if he wanted to enforce his orders. More importantly, what he has said is, for example, in the case of restaurants, if you've got an ABC license and you're opened up and Orange County is saying you can open because you're complying with Orange County's rules, I'm still going to yank your ABC license. I'm still going to yank your state board of cosmetology license if you're a nail salon or a barber shop. So the state law remains in place, and the governor continues to have some sticks he can use to beat non-compliant businesses.
Okay, thank you. Just a couple more questions, and then I'll turn it over to Trudy for questions from her colleagues. You touched on the guidelines. You took leadership role in forming of an ad hoc committee. Maybe you could touch on that. And then Councilmember Carroll asked about the CARE Act. That's another area where you took a strong leadership role. Maybe you can touch on the CARE Act and where that's at.
Yeah, the business guidelines were put in place unanimously by the board, I want to say about 3 weeks ago. Board Chairwoman Steele and I had an ad hoc committee. We invited representatives from a number of local businesses and business groups, trade groups, to talk to us about what the business community needed to at least have some modicum of ability to reopen, what rules should be put in place. The health director, Dr. Quick, was also involved, and the healthcare agency, because whatever those rules were, we needed to make sure they complied with the best available science and medical recommendations. And so we looked for a way to harmonize the two to come up with guidelines that would allow businesses to at least know they were not going to be hassled by the County of Orange. And it was a whole bunch of common sense stuff. It was things like wear masks when you're in public. If you're going to open your retail establishment, make sure that you only let a limited number of people in at any one time and that social distancing is observed. If you've got customers who are using, the pens or whatever they're touching, make sure that you're stepping up the efforts to disinfect. We put those rules in place, but also recognizing the reality of both state and municipal law, said that state law still controls, and any city that you're opening your business in, if it's got its own rules, those would still apply. For example, to take Mike Carroll in the city of Irvine, you could open in conformity with the county rules. The problem was if you didn't satisfy the city rules, the Irvine Police Department could come out and take enforcement action. And as I said earlier, if you're not in compliance with the state could come out. And we still felt, because we were hearing from the business community, it was important to provide some sort of clarity on what the county and the county medical people thought was the right direction to take. And so we put that out a couple of weeks ago, and the state is now very slowly, but very much moving in the right direction, to the point where the governor, instead of saying we are weeks away from opening, has said we are days away, and then on Monday put out new guidelines that completely changed the old guidelines. The upshot of that is that just today, found out this morning, it was either going to go out last night or today, it's gone out this morning, we have submitted the county's plan to the state to move to the next phase of reopening. The state has been generally acting on these plans within about 24 hours. We are optimistic the state will give us, by the close of business today, and if not today, by sometime tomorrow, blessings to move into the next phase of reopening, meaning that retail shops, not just in compliance with the county guidelines, but now would be in compliance with the state guidelines if they reopen with masks and physical distancing, et cetera. So we're hopeful to see malls, restaurants back in business to a certain extent over the Memorial Day weekend. Knock on wood, we don't have state approval yet, but it's coming, I expect. So that's the good news. CARES Act funding, I'll give you a real quick, $554 million came from the federal government through the state government down to the county of Orange for COVID-related expenses. And there is, at the moment, a dispute amongst the board, amongst the supervisors as how to spend approximately 75 million of those dollars. The rest of it pretty much is already spoken for in terms of COVID-related expenses, hospitals expenses. The cities, some of the expenses they've gotten, they're going to get a share of this money as well. There is a proposal that would get $75 million into the hands of small business. And the news on that front, I wish was good. It's not. Supervisor Steele and I have a plan that would make it available as of probably tomorrow. The board, a majority of the board saw fit to come up with a more bureaucratic approach, and the guidelines that we saw yesterday say the money will now be available June 29th if they hit all their benchmarks. So I'm very frustrated by that and going to continue pushing to get more money into the hands of the cities so they can distribute it to their small businesses.
All right. Thank you very much, Supervisor. Trudy, I'll turn it back over to you for any additional questions that you or others might have.
Class, let's open it up to you. What questions would you have for the supervisor?
I have a question for Supervisor Wagner.
Go ahead and state your name, Scott.
This is Scott Schultz. I want to know, because you're doing such a great job, are we considering possibly running for governor at some point?
We are not considering that, Scott. We're still in California. But Scott, thank you. I appreciate that. No, I got a big enough job here.
Gotcha.
Another question. I know this class usually has a lot of questions. What do you got for us?
Since no one's jumping in, Dom, this is Josh Friedman, your personal drone pilot and video guy. I just want to say I just want to say I missed the hang. I think you guys are doing a great job, keeping us all together, and hopefully look forward in sometime next year maybe of getting back on and making more videos.
I look forward to it. Thank you, Josh. You've done some great work for me. I appreciate it.
You guys, this is a great opportunity to
come on, guys.
You have an audience right here. Anybody?
So tough. I feel like he provided so much good information, and what he just shared with us, it's actually pretty comprehensive.
Do you know what, Don? Do you want to talk about the prisons and people being released from prison and how that might be affecting the city?
Well, yeah, let me talk about that briefly. That's an obviously very troubling situation, and we are starting to see an uptick in property crimes, which should come as no surprise as you're trying to reduce the prison population. The sheriff's got a really, really tough job there because the capacity, let me give you some numbers. The capacity for the Orange County jails is, I think, slightly more than about 5,000 bodies. And right now they're running at about half capacity, in part because we're seeing a, no surprise, significant bump in our coronavirus numbers out of the jails. And two places, the jails and the skilled nursing facilities. Take those numbers out of our calculations, and this county, we're in really good shape, especially compared to our surrounding counties. But even so, you take those numbers out, and we just be humming along. And we're also hearing anecdotally that the prisoners are actually, I've heard about swap buckets they're trading to try to spread the disease because that gets them out. It's just a whole different world. The sheriff has tried as best he can to reduce the prison population. The idea being, to the extent possible, release the nonviolent criminals. My wife is a trial court judge. I will tell you that she and the courts, despite being ostensibly closed, the criminal courts are working around the clock to try to prioritize triage, keep the right people in jail. That said, we're seeing an uptick in property crimes. It's just the reality of the effort that the sheriff is making, and I can't fault them for the way they've gone about it, but it is quite disturbing.
Thank you.
As Kim said, you covered so many elements comprehensively, Supervisor Wagner, that we're so grateful for that. Did anyone else think of a question while he was answering the previous one? No, I'm looking through the chat too to see if anything's there. No.
I do like Scott Schultz's governor comment, so.
Ooh. There might be a write-in.
I'll throw a quick one out there.
Hey, the people's will. What can I say? No, I'm not thinking about that. Anyway.
Mr. Wagner, what is the most difficult part of your job right now?
Thank you.
Well, okay, so before COVID, it was dealing with the homeless crisis, which is remains a significant issue. Kind of moved off the front page because of coronavirus, but that was there before coronavirus. It's going to be there after coronavirus. Dealing with that, but I got to tell you, my biggest frustration right now is that I have been, as you kind of allude to, fighting the governor to a certain extent on his go slow approach. And I wrote an article. I think I know why he's trying to go slow. He's given Tom Steyer and that 80-person committee the time to do the work they need to, make us more green and that make, social changes. And everybody is chomping at the bit just to get reopened. And what's frustrated me even more of late in this reopen thing is that we are stuck as an arm of the state and under state law how we can react. I'm watching other states, for example, the Wisconsin Supreme Court the other day junking the governor's stay-at-home order. Other states starting to open, and people are saying, well, why won't you? You got to challenge the governor. And I've tried to explain just the law doesn't work that way. And then we're beginning to pick up, lost in all of this stuff is not just the economic cost, but we're having the number I've heard, and it may be a little large, is an 8,000% increase in calls to our suicide hotlines. We're hearing about children. I was on Fox 11 with Dr. Drew the other day, and he was talking about the mental health aspects of this shutdown that are beginning to take their toll, and especially on kids. I got a 6-month-old granddaughter, and my daughter and I am worried about, that's such a critical age for socialization. And really, they're not seeing and getting the socialization. Gosh, I'm terrified there is a long-term impact to this that is well beyond dollars and cents. That's going to be hideous. But that is the toll that is taken on some of our younger people because of this. And God forbid it go longer, a day longer than it need to.
Mr. Wagner, I actually had a question since you had mentioned, some of the dollars and cents. I know that.
I don't want to leave on that pure note.
I'm wondering what kind of stuff got put on the back burner as far as, certain initiatives and things like that you had planned for in light of COVID and some of the funds that are going to have to be diverted there, or maybe some of the lack of funds that are going to be there for those programs.
Oh, great question. And I was on a OCTA conference call this morning. Basically, you're seeing virtually every bill in Sacramento that is not COVID related is dying. Usually that is a very good thing, by the way. Let's just you're also seeing substantial reductions in funding just for things like transportation infrastructure. You think the roads are bad and crowded now. Well, they're not crowded now. Hopefully they will be again shortly. So you're going to see significant reductions in funding for transportation. I think inevitably you're going to see substantial reductions in available funding for health and human services, because that's where the money gets spent, and to make a dent in the deficit, you've got to address some of those places and those expenditures, and so the fallout is going to be widespread and deep. I don't believe that anybody has yet fully come to grips with the impact that's going to happen on municipal budgets. In part, we're seeing just a dramatic downturn in sales tax. It's not going to return as robustly as one would hope. You don't turn a switch on, the public won't feel completely safe to go to the restaurants and to go to the stores in the numbers they were going to before. It's going to take time. And so I just see fiscally that this is going to roll out in a very unpleasant way for a long time. And it's going to, it's going to hit health and human services quite hard, I'm afraid.
Supervisor Wagner, thank you. Thank you so much for your time. I so appreciate it. Al, appreciate you. I don't know if you can see the, are you from a phone? Can you see the hand claps that are going up there for you?
Unfortunately, I can't, but
okay.
I appreciate hearing them. Thank you.
Al will let you know about that.
I will.
I count on Al. All right. Apologies for being a few minutes late, everybody. Thank you.
Oh, no, thank you. Thank you so much for your time. Al, I have a question for you.
Yes, ma'am.
How has COVID-19 affected your fishing?
Well, it has. I had a trip planned to Puerto Vallarta. That's an annual trip a week ago. And unfortunately, it was canceled. COVID is alive down there in Puerto Vallarta, which is a very, very robust tourism area. And 90% decrease in their hotel occupancy, as well as infections of COVID amongst the general population there. So the sport fishing industry has taken a big hit on this, and they are in phase 3 currently. And so all of the sport fishing boats in San Diego, and they're all sitting at the docks and unable to go out. So there's a lot of people that aren't getting funding for their daily needs. So it's a big deal in the sport fishing industry.
Thank you for sharing that. If any of you don't follow Al, you need to follow him, because we're not talking about small fish. When he tells a fish story, the fish is actually bigger than the story he's telling. So you need to follow him for many reasons. Al, is there anything else you would want to say before we do hang up? Al has been, he was on the police force in Irvine, right? Is that correct? In Irvine it was. Mayor of Irvine.
Tustin.
Oh, Tustin, I'm sorry. And what city council were you mayor of?
Tustin. I was mayor 3 times.
Also Tustin, okay. He's had so many different roles and has been a public servant for many, many, many years. Al, is there anything else you would want to say in closing to the class regarding government? And again, having been through Leadership Tomorrow, you know where we are coming from. Any last words you would want to say?
Thank you, Trudy. I would just applaud everybody that's involved in the Leadership Tomorrow program. If you want to make a difference, and that's something that's important to me, and I'm sure to you, you have to be involved. If you want to promote change, you got to be part of the solution, not part of the problem. And as we see today, more than ever, in unprecedented times, this is when it's really important for folks to work together collaboratively and to try and come up with suggestions and support for each other. Because again, as Supervisor Wagner alluded to, it is having some significant effects on people's psychological well-being, both in the young and the old. My daughter's home from school. My oldest daughter's at UCI graduating and on the dean's list and won't have a ceremony. So it's affected her psychologically too, after all that work. So again, I applaud everything that Leadership Tomorrow is doing. And if there's anything that we can do in Supervisor Wagner's office to help you in any way, just reach out to us. Our information's available online. And Trudy, don't hesitate to share my cell phone information with any of your colleagues.
Al, thank you.
Can I ask one quick question to Al?
Sure.
Yes, Kathy.
Is that all right? Just in your professional opinion, they just mentioned that they could be opening up restaurants and malls as early as this weekend. Any guesses on, there's a whole lot of pent-up demand, but then of course there are people who are still, concerned. How crazy do you think it'll be? You think they'll be flooded with people, or do you think it'll be kind of a slow build?
That's a great question. I think, Kathy, it's going to be based upon people's security of a particular location. That's all going to boil down to that. I mean, you're not going to bring your family to a restaurant that you don't feel comfortable over and you don't have some sort of faith. So I think it's going to be, with this being Memorial Day weekend and a very strong likelihood that we could get approval by the end of the day, today or tomorrow, it couldn't happen at a better time. And I think people are really hungry to get out and about. So I think it'll be robust, but I think people will be a little bit careful.
Yep. Thank you.
All righty.
Great question, Kathy. Anyone else? Question for Al.
Alan, I guess as long as Don's still here, I've been following Supervisor Wagner on social media. You guys are doing a lot of community service work right now, in addition to everything else. What are some of the projects you guys have been involved in?
Oh gosh, there's a plethora of them. We've been trying to do a lot of volunteer work and also soliciting PPEs, the safety equipment for hospitals and different locations throughout the county. So many of our staff have connections and relationships with different suppliers. So we've been trying to really push in that. And I think our resources have built up to a pretty substantial amount, which is really important should we get a resurgence of this, in months to come during the flu season. But I think it's wide ranging, everything from working with senior centers, working with the food offerings, the food bank. We did that. I was with several of my colleagues several months ago, and we went out and actually stuffed the boxes in the food banks. So we're trying to make sure that people know that we're not just sitting back, in our office or our homes, just taking care of the administrative stuff. We want to get out in the community and make sure we show them support.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Al. Last chance. Anyone else? All right. Al, thank you.
All right. Keep up the good work, Trudy, and all of your colleagues. And again, you're making a difference, and Leadership Tomorrow is a great program.
You as well, sir. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
All right, class. I am so excited that we have these next just few minutes, probably about 10 minutes or so, that we're going to spend together. Normally on your last day, of course, we would have had the luncheon, which I'm very sad we didn't have that opportunity today, but you still do have an opportunity to refer your friends and family and colleagues. And just even last night, Jeff sent me a flyer. Someone had asked for a flyer, and Kim, thank you. So I just got it last night about midnight, and I'll be shooting that out to you guys today, or pushing that out to you, that there's a flyer you can actually send to your friends, family, upload to social media. Leadership Tomorrow has been putting up social media and encouraging individuals to go forward into the next class. Again, the board is meeting twice a month, the exec board once, and then the regular board, and trying to figure out what that actually is going to look like. Obviously, we're also trying to figure out what your graduation looks like. We didn't really want to do a virtual one. What we're thinking right now, and again, Scott, Lisa, Kara, I think there's a few others on here. If I'm speaking incorrectly, please feel free to step in. Is we're hoping to just kind of put a pause on the graduation part, hoping that there's a time when we can not meet virtually, but actually meet physically. And if that's at the end of the summer or if that's in September, we're not sure on that, but we really would like to celebrate you in person. So that's what we're hoping for right now. Normally your graduation would have been next Tuesday, but there's been enough virtual graduations out there. If you want to attend another virtual graduation, they're there. But we want to celebrate you in person. So that's what we're holding off on there, which actually is also good news for you, because I'm sure one of your questions would be about the project. And I know you had to put that on hold because of sheltering in place and social distancing. And with that, if you guys want to continue, I don't know if you're still, I haven't really checked Slack lately, but if you want to still continue to look at that and see, is there something you can do during this time as a group, perhaps donating or doing a food drive or whatever it is you would want to come up with, or board, stop listening for a moment. If you want me to tell the board that it just couldn't happen during COVID, although I think there's many, many opportunities out there that you actually, could proceed with. So the project is still in your hands to do what you would like. And I know you've been staying in communication with me on that. The other thing we would normally do at the end of this day is I would then do a debriefing of what has your time in Leadership Tomorrow been like. And I don't want you just to think about the last few months, but rather even thinking back all the way to September. What has Leadership Tomorrow meant to you? Is there something perhaps you didn't know before you were a participant in Leadership Tomorrow? Is there some aspect that has helped you personally, professionally? So I'm going to now open it up to you, and if you would like to unmic and share, or if you want to put it in the chat even, it is still being recorded. So if there's something you would like to share about your experience in Leadership Tomorrow, please, this is your time to do that.
Well, this is Kim. And I really absolutely feel like we should figure out an opportunity to do something as a class project. I think that there is so many opportunities out there in which we can still put out something that's important and, I mean, even relevant to what's going on or not relevant. I'm not really attached to anything particular, but I think that as leaders, this is exactly the time when we should be thinking outside the box to figure those kind of things out and finding a way in which we can contribute for that, to create a legacy out there.
Yeah, I don't have a specific idea, but I do generally like the idea of seeing if we can come up with something that we could do in a social distancing kind of way, just because I think when we look back on this, years from now, there will be a lot of negatives to what happened, but if we could sort of have that memory of how we turned this into a positive, that would be cool.
I do have an idea, if I can share. There is a Orange County-based catering company that as a fundraiser has been making cookies that people can decorate, and then all of the proceeds that they're getting from people who buy these cookies in boxes is going toward whatever, right? And I think it's actually going toward hospitals. And I know one of the cookie boxes that they're making is actually a care cookie box. It has a nurse's shirt, it has a pill, it has a needle, and all the proceeds from that are going to hospitals. And it's something easy we can all do. There's a small cost to buy a box of cookies. We can decorate our own cookies, go on social media and show the decorations that we did and know that we're making a difference. And that's something we can all do easily from home for minimal expense. Not saying we have to do it, but there's an idea of something that I think would be fun for those of us with kids as well. And we could maybe take that on, and I could put us in touch if we wanted to do that.
Definitely. I think, I say let's just throw out some ideas out there. I love that. And I think it's, again, a great way for us to create opportunity. I'd even be interested to see if what we had chosen previously, if they have any, if they are open or if they have opportunities in which we can do that. Maybe 3 people go at a time, we keep a social distance and we do it in stages or something so that we can still maybe fulfill that commitment. I don't know. Again, just trying to figure out opportunity to look outside the norm to make this happen. At my company, we still have volunteers and we struggled for a while without them, having to pick up that load. I mean, we have over 300 volunteers that do work for us. So, and a lot of them had to because of age or other health reasons. But we actually have had several, about 50 people reach out over the last month that they're just tired of sitting home. They don't necessarily have health issues and want to be able to come in and bag up groceries to give out in our food pantry. So I think there's a lot of other opportunities out there. I think we just need to take an opportunity to look for that. Maybe we can throw them back out there for next week, and we'll just make this happen by the end of June. Or go with, you know, Josh, I think we can do several things.
Yeah. And I put a link, it looks like they're $35 a box.
Yeah.
The pictures are amazing because I photographed them, I volunteered. But she's selling them through Etsy, but if we worked with her personally, we could probably do a group thing with her. I could put everyone in touch.
Yeah.
I think this is Todd. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
I think an opportunity raised its seemingly obvious head during those interviews, and that is the concern over mental health and the incredible increase in the mental health needs. Whether we do a side project and benefit mental health of the suicide hotlines very, very specifically. Maybe there's a juvenile hotline. I don't know, but I think there's a very, very specific need that maybe we might to be a little more surgical with our project in this time to have the maximal impact. So if there's some way that we kind of lend itself to, or even pick a very, very specific mental health clinic, or again, the suicide hotline or something, if we could think along the lines of that, I think it'd be very, very appropriate for this graduating class to lend itself to that need.
Yeah, I was thinking maybe something along the lines of just individually volunteering to be maybe a guest speaker or a mentor for some students, and maybe we do go the mental health angle. I know that all these remote classrooms right now, they're getting creative and desperate for guests and ways to switch it up. So maybe there's something through the schools, or maybe it's through something on the mental health side where we could all volunteer a half hour, an hour to have a Zoom one-on-one or small group meeting with some of the kids that are struggling with the situation, and we can try to help inspire them and show them all the opportunities that could come out of this. But that's something maybe we could each do individually with a class or a small group or one-on-one, but collectively we reach hopefully hundreds of young people.
Yeah.
It's a great idea. Does anyone have any contacts? You know, way to get this started?
I can definitely reach out through some of our mental, you know, we do mental health here at Share Ourselves, but I would check with our behavioral health clinicians to find out what else is available within Orange County that we might be able to reach out to, so that it's more countywide based and not necessarily through SOS. So I'll definitely reach out on that today and see if we can put some stuff back out there and figure out how to make that work. That's one area.
Hey guys, also just if you're still interested in the old opportunity though, I wanted to let you guys know that Patriots and Paws is still open. They never closed. So
can you check in with them, Antoinette, and see if they have, even though they're open, if they're still having volunteers come in and how that might work?
Yeah, they are, because I've been going.
Okay. I think we could probably get a group to do that as well.
Or is there an option for us to take whatever it is that we need to restore back to our place and then restore it and then send it back to the warehouse?
Say that again, Justina. I'm not sure I understood that.
Okay, so I think one of the projects that we had talk about is to restore some furniture, right, for the veterans family. Is there an opportunity for us to bring in whatever that needed to be restored home with us individually, and then once they are restored, and we can send them back to the warehouse?
We probably could do that, but then we would have to pick up the furniture and then drop it back off. So that might be difficult. It's a really big warehouse. where if we were all there, we could easily socially distance. It's large.
I'm good with that.
Are you guys still on
Let's stay the course then. Let's just stay the course.
Yeah.
If we can, if there's a facility that's open that allows social distancing, I would love to see you guys in person again. If we're not going to have a graduation right away, I think maybe there's a unique opportunity to serve and it's also to see your warm body for a day. I'd love to stay that course. So if you guys are game for that, can we just pick a date and you can reach out to them and see when they can use our hands?
Yeah.
I would be game for that too, although it would be nice if we had some element for, you know, members of this group who might not feel comfortable going out in a situation like this, something that they could do from home that would contribute.
Yeah, we can definitely figure that out. I was going to say that as well, that, you know, I at this point, we have to be really respectful of how people feel in this environment, and it shouldn't, I don't think it should take away if people couldn't. We can figure out alternate solutions. Maybe there's some social media stuff that they can do that can help with that. Maybe do some, you know, publications, or I think there's lots of avenues that we could still support the organization that we chose. And maybe it just looks a little bit different for some people and how they participate.
Are you guys still communicating through Slack?
So.
Okay. All right. So maybe through email or some way to continue with that. Excellent. Well, I'm so proud of you. I love that you are moving forward with that and you want to do that. I want to be respectful of your time, so we only have 5 minutes left. You will be getting a survey today regarding today. No, you won't be getting it today. Give me till about tomorrow. Today, you'll also be getting a year-in survey that we do every year. We are going to go ahead and send out, you usually about this time choose a speaker of the year. And what's so cool actually about this year is normally Government Day speakers don't get to be in there, and so they will this year. There will be an opportunity for you to choose a speaker of the year that once the graduation does occur, that they would be a participant in that as well. I do want to say real quickly too, I was on my class Zoom last night, which are future educators, and I had 2 guest speakers who are public school teachers in the Orange County district. And I also had one who is in Whittier, and they were talking about their different districts are actually looking at about 4 or 5 different proposals for fall. And one of them might even be a flex opportunity to where, I don't know about opportunities, the word, but a flex schedule, where let's say you have a class of 30, that 15 of those kids would come Monday, Wednesday, the other 15 would come on Tuesday, Thursday, so they're socially distanced, you know, less desks or less tables in a room. And then the other days they would be online. I'm not here as the messenger for you to say that's not going to work. I'm just telling you some of the options that they are thinking about. Orange County is supposed to maybe have an answer, at least South Orange County, around mid-June. So there's supposed to be a vote taken by the individuals making these decisions by mid-June. Which again, the teachers I had on yesterday were even very concerned because they have no clue. And the individuals that I had, and I've been speaking to others, they're working so hard and they're doing a lot of really good work to stay in contact with their students, but they're a little nervous. They don't know what fall is going to look like from their perspective either. So that's just some of the insight I've had from those individuals. We're at 11:27. Is there any final comment anyone would want to say? Scott, or let's see, Vlad, are you still on there, or?
Yeah, so I just want to say that the reason that you guys are in this class is because of the conversation that we just had about continuing with the class project, and also the wonderful comments and questions that you had for our elected officials, because when we have a class like this, we never know what people are going to ask, and sometimes it's a little scary when you have a supervisor that's embroiled in a lot of very controversial issues. But I mean, that's the reason you guys are in this class, because you're in these leadership positions. So we commend you, and we're proud of you. And you know, this is a bizarre year, but we are going to make the graduation a great event, and we're not going to do it virtually because we want you guys to be there. We want to hand you your plaques in person, and just great job, everybody.
Vlad, any final comment you'd want to make?
Yes, certainly. I want to thank Scott Schultz and certainly Trudy. There was a conversation about possibly postponing Government Day. And Trudy was very adamant that we continue with this project and this event. And I want to thank her for her leadership as well as Scott's. I think it turned out fantastically. We got some great speakers. They did really, really well. And I think you got a lot out of the presentation. Again, Trudy, Scott, thank you again for all you have done for this program. And thank you all for the rest of the class for participating in this endeavor. Thank you again, Trudy, Scott.
Thank you, Vlad. And if you guys will notice in the chat, Vlad had actually put in that a contact for mental health. So whether you did it for your project or not, there is a name there. And is she with the OCDE, Vlad? Is that who she's with?
No, Diddy Hirsch, I was a hostage negotiator with the Newport Beach Police Department, and we went to Diddy Hirsch's clinic. It is a facility up in Los Angeles, and they basically run all the suicide hotline project for all of Southern California.
Okay, all right. I think you could also go through the OCDE, but as Vlad even mentioned in there, there's a lot of clearances that you need to get to go through the schools. There's a whole lot of ways to, a lot of hoops to actually jump through on that. Okay, I'm so excited because I told you 11:30 and it's 11:30 right now. So if anyone wants to stay on, they're welcome to. Otherwise, I'm going to go ahead and end the meeting. And I just think you guys are amazing. I'm so honored.
Wait, Trudy, can I just do one quick thing?
Yes, of course.
I saw Antoinette, she put down Tuesday, Thursday, or Saturday would be an opportunity. So I know a lot of people dropped off. And Antoinette, I don't know if you're still out there, but can we just do a quick vote? What days would be best?
I'm actually going to send out a doodle, Kathy, so that we could get, I think it'll be easier since so many people dropped off.
Oh, perfect.
That way we can get ideal situations for us. And we may have to split these up into a couple of groups just based on who's available on what days.
Okay.
But I think that way we can at least get a consensus of people and it'll help us. So Trudy sent me everybody's email addresses. So I'm happy to send that out, and I grabbed that off there from.
Oh, thank you. Okay, perfect.
And I'm sure the board would be fine with you going with a few different dates, you know, with what's going on right now. There's a lot of flexibility in that. I'm just so proud of you for moving forward. You guys are amazing.
I figured you guys wouldn't be too attached.
Awesome. Thank you to our coordinators for an awesome day. Loved it. And it was so great to see all of your faces. Miss you guys. Can't wait to see you in person, but thank you.
Amen. And send your referrals. Send us your referrals. We, it's a whole different year for us, and we did not